'Cause you're listening to Jams and Tea, you won't see the show on your TV, so we talk about things musically. 'Cause you're listening to Jams and Tea, you're listening to Jams and Tea. Slowly kill me.
And on the note of killing Saoirse, welcome everyone to the brand new episode of the Jams and Tea podcast, where we spin the jams and spill the tea. And today we are coming at you with a review for two albums from some very anticipated artists who have dropped some shit recently, that being Kid Cudi's long-awaited sequel to his Man on the Moon series.
Requel.
Man on the Moon 3.
Squeakquel!
That's the one. And PLAYBOI CARTI's album, his very hotly anticipated follow-up to Die Lit. We're going to be talking about Whole Lotta Red, and later on today's Record Club episode, we have Saoirse's recommended record, which is Matt Elliott's album Drinking Songs. So we have some thoughts about some albums today.
Yeah.
Let me
Boy, do we.
tell ya.
Yeah, it's going to be good. Good episode.
You want to get nuts? Let's get nuts. Play the Prince.
Yeah.
Right. So let's kick off as we typically do with our opening segment where we talk about what we've been listening to outside of the podcast in the last 7 days. Jake, why don't you lead us off?
This is going to be the easy. I don't even have to look at my spreadsheet for this because you all know what the fuck I've been listening to because I haven't shut the fuck up about it the last 4 days. But I had to sit out work most of this week because of the rules we have involving COVID, and I just couldn't go to work. And so I had some time. Yeah, horrible, terrible, really, really torn up about it. But that got me an excuse to sit down and write for a couple of days and also listen to some music. And instead of, listening to lots of, a swath of artists that I could be checking out for the first time, I've even made a list of artists to do that with this year, and I just decided to just do nothing but listen to Slowdive. And the best part about that is that they don't miss. I listened to Souvlaki a really long time ago, and I was like, this is good, but it was sort of at the inception of my shoegaze phase, so I didn't quite fully... I won't say I didn't fully understand it, but I didn't fully, understand what made it great, I suppose. So I just went and listened to everything they've done, barring a few EPs, which Tyler has recommended to me, which I downloaded last night, and I am going to happily check out. But I listened to their 4 albums. Their most recent one, the self-titled Slowdive, is my favorite, which is apparently a weird-ass take, but I am fervently in that camp because I think I've listened to not just that album multiple times every single day, but I've had certain songs on repeat, specifically Star Roving and No Longer Making Time, which make me want to dance and then kill myself. So it's wonderful. Souvlaki, by the way, I did revisit. Amazing album. And also an album that's just sort of, I never heard a single person talked about, which was heavily pushed onto me by Zach, friend of the podcast, is their album Pygmalion, which is what got me into this entire wave of Slowdive, which is this really, a huge outlier in their discography, which is this really minimal, very focused, very post-rock inspired kind of experiment that was their last album until they came out with the self-titled, and I fucking love it. It's really somber and plaintive and kind of eerie, and it just experiments with tone in the ways that I didn't expect of them to do, and I just really love it. I think it's a perfect album. In fact, I think 3 of their albums are perfect. I may have a problem. I am snorting these albums on a daily basis, and I have an issue.
Well, you may just be correct.
I mean,
Look,
it sounds less like you have. It sounds less like you have a problem and more like you have a solution.
That is actually a wonderful way of putting that, but I'm not saying that their run of Souvlaki, Pygmalion, and the self-titled is the best album run ever, but yeah, that's what I said, and I said it, and I meant it. And other than that, I listened to literally 2 other albums other than just the entirety of Slowdive's discography literally every day. And those are, I listened to Ride the Lightning by Metallica earlier because I listened to our Metallica episode, and every time I hear somebody talk about Ride the Lightning, I'm like, time to put it on for the 600th time. And spoilers, that album's still perfect. What do you know? And the other
We're dropping
one
some
is,
hot takes in this.
yeah. I'm all over the place.
It's not like that album is one of only 7 to have a unanimous 10 out of 10 score from this podcast.
As it deserves. And the last album that I listened to was just like on a complete whim. I have no idea why. It was probably just because Slowdive sort of got me into the mood of this kind of moodier shit. But I listened to Faith by The Cure, which is one of my favorite underappreciated Cure albums. It is a I very much lean towards their slimmer projects, their more focused projects that I come back to frequently, like Head on the Door. But Faith is amazing. It's a really, really despondent, very, very much more post-punk than maybe anything they made, barring maybe like 17 Seconds. But it's fantastic. More people need to give that record love. It's great. But yeah, that's all I've been listening to this week. Slowdive, thrash metal.
Oh boy. So now I gotta do the speaking bits. What I've
That is
been
what
Yeah, that's
podcast
why you're here.
is.
Yeah. What I've been listening to, you know what, I'll keep up the slow dive. I listened to Pygmalion also. I enjoyed it. I don't quite love it or slow dive as a whole really, but I do strongly enjoy them. It's just they don't tickle that extra itch for me to really just fall in love with them, but they're quite good. I do respect them. Interestingly about this particular listen, exactly a year to the day after I first listened to Souvlaki, I listened to Pygmalion, which just worked out.
Next year, self-titled.
Next year, self-titled.
I was finna hit that with a solid 5.
Hmm.
That's not even against you. It's just I would be
Oof.
shocked. I would be shocked if it wasn't.
Another album I listened to.
Another
one, Mr. Pharoah Sanders's Karma. Just one of the greatest spiritual jazz albums I've heard, particularly ever. That's not a hot take. If
The
you don't
saxophone
agree with
playing
that,
on that album is
what album? Karma, Pharoah Sanders.
oh fuck yes.
Also, about that just last week, love it. something that caught me off guard: the singing on that album, where he has like two verses on the big 32-minute song, and then like just a singular verse on it. That was just like, okay, didn't expect that.
Pharoah Sanders spitting hot bars.
Yeah. Other thing, Science Fiction by Uncle. This is a really beloved 90s trip-hop album.
I saw
Everybody
your
break.
face, Jake.
Let him go.
I saw your face, Jake, when you totally thought he was talking about Brand New, and so did I.
I did the exact same thing.
Yeah,
if you guys saw me do that, that was why. And then
I don't know why, because it's August, because him listening to Science Fiction by Uncle makes way more fucking sense.
Yeah,
I-
no,
I
also
will-
great. I don't...
My first thought was, whoa. And then my second thought was, wait, why? So this you saying uncle right after that makes more sense.
Yeah,
but
that was
Science Fiction
entirely,
fucking owns. Both.
that was entirely intentional to do that bait. But no, Uncle's Science Fiction, amazing classic 80s trip hop album, very fun.
Happened to come out in 1997.
Oh.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Roasted.
Tom York did some production on that, so that would have been some interesting
Yeah,
time.
he did some,
And a
Vocal.
feature.
Yeah, and a
Yes.
feature. It's just like a fucking entourage of who's who. It's so
Yeah,
fun.
for real.
Next thing, Dyspepsy by the Plunderphonics band Negative-Land. This is a really strange, kind of different take on Plunderphonics from like the Avalanches stuff, where here this whole album is essentially kind of chiptune jingle, like parodies on like corporate jingles and songs you would hear in the background of Pepsi commercials, but at the same time exposing the kind of almost dystopic horror of advertising, particularly Pepsi's. It's really weird, really neat. I would have to recommend that.
That sounds awesome. It sounds a
Yeah.
lot like PC music, actually.
A good chaser to Fight Club.
I would say it almost feels like a precursor to something like James Ferrara's Far Side Virtual in a sense. It has a lot of that similar energy, although
Makes
this taking less of an ironic twist as that album and more a almost documentarian take. And the final thing I listened to, which I initially listened to back in early December, but I've been listening to from then until now, is Coheed and Cambria's second album, In Keeping Secrets of Silent Earth 3. And I've heard their first 4 now, and I'd have to say I think it's my favorite. I really fucking love it.
This is a good take.
Good take.
I mean, fuck, I could play it for you, and that's a good argument for why it's amazing. But yeah, that's about all I listened to this week.
August digging early Coheed is like it is just the most correct sounding thing in my head. Like if you just put like that August liking the first couple Coheed records is like Tyler liking Autechre. Like these things just work in my head.
I for what it's worth, I also happened to listen to the first Coheed and Cambria record a couple of weeks ago, and I quite enjoyed it.
Second Stage Turbine?
Yes.
Okay.
No, the other first album of theirs.
Well, it's weird with Coheed though, because like they technically do have one that's before that, kind of.
It's under like that. It's under like Shibuti or something.
Yeah,
That's
they have a weird. It's like the second, third, their names.
Yeah, that's a different thing. We don't talk about Shibuti.
Yeah.
We're not gonna do that.
Yeah, so I guess it's my turn.
Indeed.
Did actually listen to some stuff this week. Made a nice change of pace to do the thing that we have a podcast to talk about. So in the wake of the tragic passing of MF Doom, I decided to finally take that deep dive. Started with Operation Doomsday. Very good album. Doom both as a presence and as a sort of producer and craftsman. Just very stellar right out of the gate. Not saying anything new there. I did not love the skits. Would probably be like a hard 9 without those.
I identify with that very deeply, even on his best records like Food. That is a prevailing trend that I wish I could get on board with it, but I never can.
Yeah, I find it far less egregious than on albums like the Saturation trilogy, for instance. But it doesn't hurt the album that much in the long run. The other new thing I listened to was Julia Holter's Loud City Song, which is her album right before Have You in My Wilderness.
Yes.
And I have to say, I kind of prefer it.
Oh, wow.
That's a dope hot take. I don't agree, but I respect the fuck out of it.
I think, more or less, I think they're on the same level of quality, but I find myself preferring the sonic palettes of Loud City Song, particularly because I find them so hard to pin down. I find that there's something almost sort of elliptical in the way that the album dares you to identify what is even happening on it through just minimalism and equal parts, very bold and expressive sonic choices. And, I would listen to her sing The Newspaper, so there's that.
That
Um,
certainly does help. I'm gonna have to go back to that now that you say that about it, because I think the thing that you like about it the most is the thing that sort of kept me at arm's length with it. And I've become such a fan of Aviary and Have You in My Wilderness that I definitely owe that another shot. So I'll have to do that.
I
yeah,
love that
it
record quite a
definitely.
bit as well. Sorry, I was just gonna say it helped for me. I heard that record before "Have You in My Wilderness" even came out, um, and it felt like, whoa, this is a really special artist with a very unique voice, and I certainly did not expect her to get as kind of popular within the kind of sphere of indie music that she's in. So yeah, it's a really dope record.
Yeah, I think it does intentionally hold itself at arm's length from the listener for a fair portion of it, and it really does pay to sit alone in your room doing nothing
Mhm.
with the lights off and just listening. Um,
That was me throughout the second half of December in her entire discography.
yeah, I can think of worse ways to spend your time. Um, Re-listens, uh, inspired by a conversation I had with Tyler and friend and occasional guest of the podcast, Zach. I re-listened to Death Cab for Cutie's Plans, which um, I think, generally speaking, Transatlanticism is a better album, and I would rate it higher. But Plans is definitely my favorite. Um, just every song, but the last one, has its own special meaning to me. And, it's not like an album where every song is a 10. I tried to think of albums that I have that with, and the closest I came was Go Farther and Lighten Us, which has like 14 tens and 2 nines. Um, but I digress. Um, but every song on Plans is like just its own brilliant little short story. And I find that more rewarding than the one long story that Transatlanticism tells, even though, Stable Song is good, but it also it's a weird closer and it feels in comparison to literally every other song on it. Um, Other things I listen to, uh, Tyler might mention this, but I re-listened to Jimmy Eat World's EP based off of Future's B-sides called Stay on My Side Tonight, which, if they made an album that explored that sound individually, it would be hands down my favorite Jimmy Eat World album, like with no contest. Um, I don't know what it is about that EP in particular. Um, I have a lot of history wrapped up with both it and Futures. Um, I've spent a lot of time with both of them, so that certainly plays an element. But I think the three originals and the Heat Miser cover are like just just unfathomably based, to use the internet lingos on you.
I'll even go to bat for the Postal Service style remix of "Drugs Were Me," which I think I saw get a lot of flack when I looked the EP up, but I thought it was pretty cool.
That sounds interesting. I've never heard this, but I love
Um,
Futures, so
but yeah, no, the EP itself is great. The songs are great. Disintegration is a great song, a really great song. I can definitely see why Morgan would call it his favorite song by them. It's just really fucking good. The drums on that track are just insane.
Yeah. But yeah, that's all from me.
Okay. Hello. So in the last week, I have listened to "The Sound of Perseverance" by Death. Which, like, for the first 30 seconds, I was like, I don't know. And then the rest of the album started, and it didn't finish till it was over, and I was in the ground, and I loved it.
Death. They get what it says on the tin.
Really.
Death.
No, this is so powerful. I loved it so much. Speaking of your lady, I listened to "Have You in My Wilderness" this week, which, oh boy, howdy, did I love that so much. Dropped a re-listen to "Love Her and the Song" by one Mr. Frank Turner this week.
Hell yes.
Yeah, yes,
That might be a good album.
Might be perfect.
Might be.
Yeah,
Might be a 10 out of 10 record.
I wouldn't know.
I might agree with you, Jake.
Amazing contribution, August.
You're welcome.
But no, basically, like after.
I'll put this on now.
Okay.
There you go.
that you,
Mr. Fucker has
always,
entered the chat.
You always have that nearby. I love that.
Of course I do.
Great. Yeah, I've realized that like after what am I saying? After Be More Kind came out, I kind of stopped listening to Frank Turner so much because just like my
You are not the
emotional.
only one.
Wonder why.
Yeah, well, it's kids like. Yeah, that album sucked, but I still had the rest of the albums. But my like emotional investment in him as an artist just dropped off the fucking map. For good reason.
That's relatable.
For me, it was definitely an Idols and
Ultramono.
whatever their most
Yeah.
recent. Yeah, that one. It was it definitely had that effect for a while.
Yeah, but like this is the first time, probably since then, except for No Man's Land when it came out, I've like sat down with a Frank Turner record, and I have missed this feeling so much. And yeah, I need to just go back and listen to all of his other records again. Even ones I haven't listened to in full before, like England, Keep My Bones. I should just do that.
Oh, yeah, England Keep My Bones is great.
Yeah, because the man has like 3 tens for me, and I have records of his that I still haven't listened to. Just love that man. I hope we do a B-sides of him one day. I would like to tie it into whatever he does next, but I don't know when that's going to be. But yeah, I love that man to. I don't love that man to pieces. I love these albums to pieces. Yes, and I also listened to "Turn Out the Lights" by Julian Baker, which is one of the most heartbreaking and beautiful records I've ever heard. There is a song called "Sour Breath" on it that just took my fucking breath away.
Appointments. Cheery tune. That.
It's Hurt Less for me. Hurt Less is the one that undoes me.
Oh,
Yeah.
God.
I mean, really, I could pick 85% of the songs, and I could say that they're as heartbreaking. But they're
Her
all
new
good.
album
Baker be like my. Oh yeah, that's right.
It's hitting next month, February.
Oh, I'm so fucking excited for that.
Me too.
I'm very but I listened to a 2020 record that I missed this morning, and it was Ulcerate's "Stare Into Death and Be Still," which, Jesus Christ, is so good. It's so good.
Oh yeah, it is.
Just chaos, but like controlled chaos. I want
Tasty.
whatever they do next. I'm going to listen to it because, as much as I loved this, I feel like they can really hit the roof on enjoyment in the way that when I listened to the first Death record, I knew they had like a sound of perseverance in their canon that I was going to get to.
They have a pretty substantial discography that, from the looks of it, all of it is as good as that.
Yeah, I was gonna say
yeah.
they're like at their fucking human/individual thought patterns. Moment of their career, it seems like
their symbolic is on the horizon. Like, ooh.
Yeah. So that's going to be the one where
Quivering with anticipation.
I'm wet.
Well, you just outright said it. Okay.
I love Andrew WK.
I do.
I do. I would like to party hard. Anyway, I love this record, and whatever they do next, I would put money on being a 10.
Not bad. Not a bad assessment there.
Very good. Okay, so I listened to a few records this week, so I decided, like I did last week, to write down a list of the ones I want to talk about, so I'm not spending so much time trying to find them like I'm doing right now. So the first one I want to shout out. The first one I want to shout out is so there's a lot of, like Jake, there's quite a few bands I've been wanting to get into this year, new set of discographies to try and destroy. And one of those bands is the kind of not offshoot, but coil adjacent sort of a psychedelic drone folk band, Current 93. Um, and so I listened to their record, All the Pretty Little Horses, which what I actually listened to was a compilation called The Inmost Light, which contained that album and 2 EPs that bookended it, and they're basically a trilogy. And so I listened to that album, All the Pretty Little Horses, with the accompanying EPs, and it's amazing. It's really it's not the same sort of sound, but it has exactly the same kind of atmosphere and emotional tone as like Swan's mid era stuff, like
White
Light, and also like the Angels of Light stuff specifically that Michael Gira did, like their record How I Loved You, if you're a fan of that.
So basically, I'm going to love them.
Well, yeah, it's like it's heavier on the drone side of things than what Swans do, but there's the front man of the band is an incredibly compelling presence, and there's these really stirring instrumentals that get quite moving and eerie. It's never heavy. It's always kind of quite delicate but doomy. And also Nick Cave is on 2 of the songs on the album, so it's
Oh.
he including one song where he does spoken word in his Australian accent, which is very jarring. But
Too used to him singing. It's weird.
But yeah, he does.
Yeah, I saw the tweet you made where you said that every time I remember Nick Cave is Australian, a little piece of me dies.
Yeah, and I stand by that. But, great guy, great record. Cannot recommend it enough. I actually think that it would have broad appeal to all 4 of you in different ways.
And new Nick Cave on the horizon.
Yeah, Nick Cave did just announce.
Which life things are happening right now? Nothing important, but I wasn't listening. Which album are we talking about in question? Grinder Man?
No, I wasn't talking about a Nick Cave album. I was talking about an album from the psychedelic drone folk band Current 93 called All the Pretty Little Horses. Which
okay. I didn't see the connective tissue there.
All
Okay.
the Pretty Horses is in the Cormac McCarthy novel.
Yes, yeah. So it's presumably a reference to that. But yeah, Nick Cave's on 2 of the songs. It's a very good album. All right, second one I want to shout out. I've been getting back into, actually prompted by Jake and some other people as well. I've been getting back into 70s era Miles Davis. So I listened to one of my gaps in my 70s era listening, which is his album Big Fun, which is compiled of recordings made around the same time as Bitches Brew and tribute to Jack Johnson. And there's 4 pieces on this record. It's like 100 minutes long, the album, and there's 4 big pieces on it. 2 of them are pretty good, decent, really strong, great performances. You can definitely hear shades of that era. But the other 2 pieces are fucking phenomenal. And I particularly want to shout out a piece called Go Ahead John, which was recorded in the tribute to Jack Johnson sessions, which is notable for being completely constructed in the editing room by Teo Macero, who basically took the stems of that recording and basically interspliced different solos from individual performers and created this literal sound collage that somehow still sounds like a cohesive piece. You have these bleeding guitar solos that sound like John McLaughlin is literally tearing his own heart out, and you have them layered atop each other and spliced together. It's just, I have not heard anything else in all of music that sounds like that piece in particular. So even if you don't have time for Big Fun as an album, it's not a cohesively amazing record. But definitely check out that piece in particular. It's
I also listened to Kind of Blue this week. I don't mean to belittle that because that was perfect, by the by.
oh yeah, no, I mean it's kind of fucking blue.
Yeah, I was about to say, I was like, I didn't mention it, not because I didn't like it, but because I am a moron with a very limited memory, and Tyler's probably about to talk to another band that I also forgot I listened to an album from this week.
Well, look, you're mentioning it now.
Yeah, no, you can't. It's fucking Miles Davis, you know.
Yeah, I mean,
No,
again,
and for the record, we know you don't like it because if you gave it anything less than a 10, I would have driven to your house and removed your feet.
I believe you actually literally said, if Jake gives Kind of Blue anything less than a 10, I will eat my dog.
Yeah, he did
Yeah,
say
that is what I said.
And then Jake
Thankfully.
gave it a 10, so we're safe.
And trust me, I really wanted to just be like, it's a 9.
Yeah.
Do it.
No, but anyway, next record I want to shout out. I listened to a record called Illadelph Half-Life, which is I think actually the third album from the legendary hip hop act The Roots, known for records like Things Fall Apart and their subsequent stuff. But this is a record that in the hip hop world is canonized as one of the greatest hip hop records of all time, but in kind of mainstream music, people kind of aren't really necessarily as aware of it. Once you get into the world of hip hop, I think you become aware of it. But I was struck by how beloved it seemed to be, and so I went and checked it out, and it's amazing. It's one of the best hip hop albums I've ever heard. It's 80 minutes long, so it's a long motherfucker, but it's like To Pimp a Butterfly level good. It's just outstanding. It's like perfect hip hop song with incredible decade topping verse after decade topping verse. It's like listening to Illmatic twice in a row, but better. It's amazing. Holy shit, is it amazing. Black Thought absolutely drops some of the best verses of all time. I feel like
Dude just brings it on everything.
Yeah, so the fact that they actually leveled up from this album when they made Things Fall Apart tells you the level of quality that they were at in their golden era. Yeah, amazing album.
I don't know why, but I've been waiting to properly dive into them because like there's non-zero chance I would love that.
I was gonna say, I'm like, I think you would be the other person on this podcast that would just be like, yeah, 10s and 10s and 10s.
It's like it takes the kind of jazz influence stuff that you hear in a band like Tribe Called Quest, and it does it. I am hesitant to say better. I think that's kind of not getting the point across right. But basically, you hear the jazz instrumentation live in the Roots records. It's not all samples. You're actually listening to real musicians. Not that that's inherently better, but it's a different experience, and it's a much more a vivacious one where it's not just the performances of the rappers that are dragging you along. It's the way everything just sounds like this living, breathing entity on all of their records. Amazing stuff.
You ever just think about the fact that they're currently Jimmy Fallon's band?
Yeah, I do.
You ever just like?
Yeah,
I think I can literally say that this is an issue I have 100% lost sleep over.
Clearly, that's something they've chosen to do. But yeah, it's like
hope the paycheck is big. That's all I'm saying.
When they've put out like 2 or 3 records in the last 10, 12 years, it's like, damn, missed opportunities.
I respect the hustle.
Yeah.
So I'll say it that way.
Yeah. And speaking of, God, there was some fucking fire this week. I also listened to another 10 out of 10 record for the first time, and another record that it's like, why didn't I listen to this before now? And that is
another one.
Depeche Mode's Songs of Faith and Devotion.
Yeah.
Grew up with the music.
Good.
Grew up with the music of Depeche Mode. My dad had fucking Construction Time Again on cassette tape. of all things, a really random album of theirs that's pretty good.
Yeah, I was about to say, I was like, that is not one of their better known albums to my
It's
knowledge.
a good album, but yeah, for some reason I kind of never dug into their later stuff, despite the fact that it's all just as acclaimed as their 80s stuff. But my God, this is my favorite Depeche Mode album. I've listened to it.
It's the best.
I've listened to this album
Now,
genuinely.
I'm gonna.
You're gonna
Best
disagree.
is a strong term.
Okay, fine, and that's your opinion, man.
I'm not saying you're wrong.
Yeah, well, it's my
Because
favorite.
I've definitely listened to Songs of Faith and Devotion more than Violator. But all I'm just saying, let's not close any doors here.
All I'm saying is Violator has Waiting for the Night and Clean, which are fine. I just don't love them. Songs of Faith and Devotion, I love every song on it. And also it just has these wild moments of like really really unexpected shit. Like, I forget what it's called, but the penultimate track is like as a string laden ballad that sounds really melodramatic.
One Caress.
Yeah, exactly. And that's like, I love it. I've never heard anything like this on a Depeche Mode album. It sounds amazing. And fucking In Your Room is just the biggest fucking banger they've ever fucking made, maybe. I listened to it in the
Vocal
car.
performances, man.
I listened to it in the car literally like an hour ago on my way back from the airport, and I just banged it and turned the fucking volume up, and it just sounds amazing. Also, Judas is low-key one of the most underrated tracks ever. It's awesome. And fucking, I just love this album to bits. I'm going to be listening to it over and over and over and over and over.
Tyler Core at its finest.
Yeah, that was one where you started talking about it again, and I just immediately downloaded the Flax.
Yeah.
Like, I need it.
Yeah. And one more album I want to shout out, a little bit more on the obscure side. And this is actually an artist that I have our mutual friend Spencer to thank for getting me into, an avant-garde jazz composer and multi-instrumentalist by the name of Anthony Braxton. Really famous in the kind of 70s and 80s sort of jazz scene of experimental jazz. Legendary composer, and he does make some really strange and arcane and weird jazz compositions. I think if you're a fan of like John Zorn, for example, you'll really, really dig Braxton. I listened to his record New York Fall 1974, which Spencer sent me. It's really kind of, it's avant-garde jazz, but not like free jazz in the sense that it's wild and ascension sort of thing, but it's like there are moments that are kind of wild and crazy like that, but there are also moments that are more kind of eerie and slow and unsettling. And there's really creative integration of lots of different instruments. There's really cool synthesizer stuff on this record that I was not expecting to hear on an avant-garde jazz record from the early 70s. But yeah, Braxton is an incredibly talented composer that I'm really glad to be aware of now. I'm going to be checking out a lot more of his stuff. And yeah, that was my week. Okay, now it's time to move on to our long-awaited reviews for today. And we,
What's up first?
We, of course, kick off with Playboy Carti, Whole Lot of Red.
Oh, yeah.
Well.
Yeah. I hold the world record on this album.
Yeah, do you? What's your world record? Because I've seen some other ones go up on YouTube.
I've got an 8. I think I've got an 8.96 on it.
Okay, I haven't seen any Whole Lot of Red album cover.
I haven't seen
runs
any.
That are faster than that.
This was. I had no fucking idea what you.
I haven't seen any.
I still don't.
Haven't seen any
August's YouTube channel.
So for our listeners at home, August has that world record in creating the album cover, speed running the album cover for this album. You should go and check out his video. It's a whirlwind. And in many ways, it has a similar energy to the experience of listening to the album itself.
How dare
That's
you
not
insult
encouraging.
August like that?
Well, it's 8 seconds long, so
Yeah.
you're not going to lose much. But it has the
How
same
dare
kind
you.
of like adrenaline pumping energy as this record has. And I'm torn because I have a lot to say about this record. And I don't know whether I should go first or last.
Well, Tyler, we've had many a discussion about how this should be addressed, and I've been through a journey with this album because I listened to it the night it dropped. Because let me tell you something, my Twitter timeline was losing their goddamn minds over this thing. 10 out of 10, best first listen. This is the greatest thing ever. And
Interesting, really, because
Oh,
my
yeah,
Twitter timeline was losing their shit, saying it's garbage.
This I think that is
The
perhaps
dichotomy of man.
truly, I mean, that is the most indicative thing about this album. There is not, I did not see a single negative opinion on my entire timeline, including the people I follow on music Twitter. Like, so I was just like, look, I listened to Dial-Lit. Not for me. I don't hate it. I don't particularly like it. It is a fucking flat line for me, but it's just like, oh, maybe I'm just not into trap music. And then I'll listen to Travis Scott, and I'm like, no, I am. This I just don't think is particularly that good. And I was just like, well, let's give Whole Lotta Red a shot. And then I listened to it, and let's just say that we planned on talking about this in a very specific way so that we could come at it from an interesting point of view. So let me get the uninteresting part out of the way, which is the fact that I think this album sucks shit. It's bad. If I have to, I have notes. They're not many because, frankly, I gave up. But I've got enough. Okay. So, just out the bat, where I will leave the contextualization of who Playboi Carti is and what he's doing and what he has done for people better equipped to do that than me. However, the album starts off with its intro track, Rockstar Made, which is a decent way to gauge whether or not Whole Lotta Red, clearly a divisive album, will be for you. Because if you like this song, it's probably a pretty good way of gauging whether or not you'll fuck with the album. So naturally, I hate this song. I think the ad-libs that are on this song, across the album, really, are annoying. I think that the random vocalizations are completely needless and do not add anything close to approximating a personality, and really just serve to be a bell and whistle that scrapes against the primal, like the frontal cortex of my brain in the most ugly way possible. The never too much repetition, Carti's delivery, he sounds squeaky, he sounds strained, he's clearly trying to be animated, and sure, that's neat, but he sounds like he is rapping in a different stratosphere than the beat, which sucks. The bass awkwardly trudges through this staticky electronic trap beat. Jangling noises punctuate this song in the second half, totally at random, and it is like, it's not even like a musical quality, it's just like a thing that happens. I don't like dislike this because of what it's going for. It just feels like a bunch of half measures on what it's going for, and Jesus Christ, I just think Playboi Carti is so fucking annoying. He does not disprove this throughout the entire album. It's the same. It's on Go to the Moon, the follow-up, I have one note, and it's fuck off, Kanye, and I'm not talking about this song. It's slight, it's less than 2 minutes, and it sucks. Stop Breathing. God, this bass sounds like shit. The whole album, this is just what Carti does. This song, this is just what the whole album is going to be like. And if you're not on board already, jump off the fucking ship. The next song, Beano, exclamation point. It's cheap. This album sounds cheap. It sounds rushed. It sounds slapped together. This beat is an assembly of barely rhythmic electronic hits over poorly implemented bass. And this leads me to my note of what is my thesis for this album. At least he's having fun. And then you get fucking Jump Out of the House, which is, why does he deliver his lines like this? I want to kill myself. This isn't fun. I find him as an MC to be incredibly uncompelling. He is totally lacking in presence. He is annoying in all of the wrong ways. The beat on here, I think, is fine. The delivery at the end, though, is just fucking nonsense. Metamorphosis. I wouldn't call this delivery particularly good, but I feel like I'm more on his wavelength. Maybe it's just the fact that my brain feels like it's melted by this point. Slayer. The production here, it's okay, except for the bass, but you know what? I've come to just sort of expect this. It is uniformly mixed like shit, but I just don't care. This feels more like a traditional trap song. It feels like it really is of this is just what I expect from Playboi Carti, I guess. Maybe it's Stockholm Syndrome, but this is the closest I get to enjoying the album because it feels tangible, even if a lot of my problems persist. No Sleep. I give up here. This is where it becomes completely evident that I will be repeating myself the entire time if I rag on this album, because he is a one-trick pony. Every song sounds the same, it's jagged, the production is sloppy, he is a terrible, terrible MC who is I can't do it. On a completely textural level, if I separate context and genre and what makes Carti as an artist interesting and why people like him, I'm sure there's many compelling reasons and a lot to dissect here, and I do have stuff to say about that. But just as a musical experience, this is fucking unbearable. I hate this shit, and it really only got worse on re-listen. I actually had this rated higher than Tyler when we both first listened to it, and our opinions completely fucking crisscrossed. It makes me tired, man. I feel old when I listen to this shit. I feel like a fucking boomer.
In the same way, my opinion on the record, is purely about the music. I can be aware that Carti is a guy who is worth talking about because, frankly, I'm baffled by the fact that this album has supporters, I suppose, but that's where my interest stops. So my opinions are really all about how much I fucking hate this record. So I'm just going to get that out of the way now, and then the interesting stuff can happen after that. There was just a visceral discomfort as soon as the first song started, within the first half of a second. And it's not just because there's a really popular rap song from about 10 years ago that I swear the samples that I hated then. And this isn't better. Carti is constantly inane and unintelligible on this song. And
that's his flow. Every song, every bar.
He got a bitch pregnant is a constant refrain on this song. Just constant reiteration of she's talking too much, she's sucking my dick. It's just do we have to
I thought I was fucking disassociating. I came untethered from reality.
Again, at least he's having fun.
It's just constantly on this record, Carti comes across like someone I would cross the road to avoid.
Carti comes across on this record like someone who has never had sex.
Which is provably untrue. He has a child.
Yeah, it's like the Megan Thee Stallion record.
Megan Trainor. Oh dear.
that record will be called Bad News.
You know what? It took us longer than I thought to go completely off the rails here. So that's commendable, I think.
The Megan Thee Stallion record came out last year, and one of the things that is most divisive about that record is the constant sort of vocalizations, the noises that aren't words, but cuz hard consonant words that she makes in the background on almost every song. And part of the reason you might want to go with that is because Megan is bringing a lot of personality and attitude and charisma. But when I feel like Carti is swallowing the end of every line on this record, those vocal intonations just become...
Death to mumble rap!
Okay. Oh dear.
I'm gonna beat your ass.
No.
They just become sort of part of the same annoying tapestry.
One thing I will say for vocalizations, not just on this record, but just kind of generally in trap music, is I see it as kind of very analogous to if not almost identical in intention and style, to jazz scatting. And I just don't never see anyone complaining about jazz scatting is all I'm saying. I'm not directing it at
It's because
you.
no one does it.
I'm not directing it at you guys. I'm just directing it generally.
Okay. But I don't hate these vocalizations on principle. Like, I quite like it frequently on that Megan record that we talked about when she does very similar things.
Yeah, Travis Scott does it all the time, and I don't mind it.
I think a huge part of this is just how annoying you find the artist who is doing it to be. How much you're into their presence.
No, I think.
I mean, I would agree with that, but I also hate the production with a visceral passion.
It's dog shit.
No.
Everything sounds awful, and it's an hour long, so it's just an hour of since the mix way too quiet, I have to try to hear the actual melody here.
It's also 24 songs long.
Yeah, for real. The saving grace is Kid Cudi. There was a point.
The only time this sentence will be spoken today.
Yeah. Well, I was listening to the record and I was suddenly realizing, I no longer want to rip out my own ears, and it was because it was Kid Cudi, star of Bill and Ted 3.
He actually in that? I don't know.
Yep.
He is in that.
Yeah,
He plays
okay.
himself.
I see.
There's a moment where he shows up and Keanu Reeves says, "It's Kid Cudi," and
Like
it's
he's
a moment.
Dora the Explorer.
Speaking of becoming untethered from reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
The best way I can describe my experience with this record is to show you briefly what my notes kind of look like, because I just give myself enough space for like the length of the song and then right within that space. And this is the first page, and then this is the second page,
Oh, jeez.
and then this is the third page. And those lines are the song titles. And it beat me down, this record. I've listened to it like 2.5 times now, because the first time I just gave up and listened to Julia Holter instead. And there has been a solid 10 seconds across the listening spectrum where I was having fun. I just find everything about this grating. I find the personality behind it not only grating, but generally hateful in almost every respect. The lyrics are hateful and bad and annoying. And I think the world would be a better place if this album didn't exist.
My God.
Rip.
Well, I'll just go ahead if there's no opposition. I'll make this quick. I don't need to belabor any points here. I'd like to start by saying we don't have a lot of viewers on this podcast yet, so it's doubtful that anyone was hotly anticipating what I would be saying about the new, check my notes.
Incorrect.
Oh,
Incorrect. I have heard from multiple people who've said they have been very much wanting to hear all 5 of us talk about this album.
Oh, really?
Yes.
No
All right.
shit.
Well,
Well, in that
I'm
case,
flattered.
Monkey's
to
forefinger curls.
I have
No,
to
I'm
check.
sure they were fully aware of what would happen.
Oh,
Yeah,
right. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
I have to check my notes here. What exactly did you think I would think of an album by Playboy Carti? If I'm reading that correctly. What the fuck did you think I would think? My prevailing thought listening to this album is, why in the name of God am I listening to this album? I never in my life has anything been made less for me. From Jump Street. It's unbearable. I can't stand it. It's the worst vocal presence I've ever heard in my life, maybe. And I hated every single second of listening to it. It's to such a degree that I never take notes, but I didn't write down any favorite or least favorite tracks for any of the albums that we're reviewing today. And in regards to Matt Elliott, that has more to do with the fact that I think it works so well as one giant piece. But the other two, it's to borrow a term from our friends across the pond, I could not be arsed. Yeah, it is. I don't fucking care.
Like,
It's-
the image in my head of you, Morgan Diatley, my best friend in the world, sitting down in your room and putting this album on is the funniest fucking thing
It's so
ever
stupid. I love doing this podcast. I even love it when we get experiences like this. But sometimes I just have to sit down and question, why do I listen to the things that I listen to? So I won't belabor anything with my hatred. Because I did hate listening to this. The fact that it just refused to end didn't help anything. But it's not for me. It's like rolling up to the fucking PBS Kids Network and railing against the shows for being bad. Like I'm not the audience. I was never meant to be the audience. I'm not the one being targeted here. Really, it's more on me for listening to this in the first place. So it's like I'm never actively offended by this album. I will never think about it again once we are done here. And everybody, we can all just move on with our lives. People who enjoy it can enjoy it. I have no thoughts about that. Not that that's ever a factor in the first place, but you get my point. Yeah. Why? Yeah. The fuck?
You raise a good point. This is, I think in the last 6 or so months, we have been presented with a piece of art, regardless of medium, where we experience it, and we have such a fundamentally different experience from some of the people that surround us that it's like, you're just more frustrated at the disparity than you might be at your actual relationship with the piece of art.
Reading the good takes on this record is like you guys listening to people praise Miami Vice. It's like
yes, and like it is
No,
one of
that's
those instances
exactly
where you
what
feel,
came to mind. Miami
it
Vice.
feels like you are being gaslit. So, on that level, I guess, it raises a question. That question being, why do people who enjoy Playboy Carti enjoy him? Because clearly, Saoirse, Morgan, and I can't really answer this question because this is just so far removed from our being and state of mind that it just like it's just difficult to approximate it just because it's such a top to bottom all-encompassing experience no matter how you feel.
I think you really touch on a good point when you say how far removed it is from the sort of stuff that we typically hear, the sort of stuff that we typically experience. And I'm not going to get into it yet because I'll go after August, but I want to preface everything I say by making sure that it's clear that I am conflicted on this record. I don't have particularly strong feelings one way or the other. But I do think that it's kind of like growing up on Blockbusters and then someone shows you fucking a Stan Brakhage movie. You know what I mean? It's like, and maybe that sounds pretentious, but it's like the thing that came to mind right now. It's like you're you're used to a certain set of parameters for what people love about music, and then you're thrown into something completely that feels completely almost like a different form.
I would say in this case in particular, it's more like growing up having only seen Stan Brakhage movies and then seeing a Blockbuster. But
maybe.
It's more jarring.
Yeah. Maybe, yeah. That's maybe a better way of going about it. I don't know. Anyway, I'll shut up for now.
Grand Wizard August.
Yeah.
If the three of us, the barons of meeting shit halfway, felt the way that we did,
Yeah.
how do you feel about Whole Lotta Red?
Well, I of course I am the youngest member on this podcast, the closest to the target demographic, perhaps, of this LP, and I would like to open this
Middle
by
schoolers.
yeah, I suppose, but
Really?
I would like to open this by saying that a whole lot of red, more like a whole lot of coital manure, because this album is fucking shit.
That's an Eminem bar. That right there, what you just said, is an Eminem bar. How dare you bring that shit into this podcast?
I wish I was listening to a mid-tier Eminem album. I fucking said it.
If that's yeah, but no, I mean I agree with a lot of the statements made pretty much all of the statements made before.
I'm getting another
about this
beer.
album. But
Fatal manure. I'm gonna start a grindcore band and call it that.
Hell yeah. But I would like to kind of add my piece to the discussion about this album, and that obviously I have stated I do agree with most of what you guys have said already, but what I find particularly, for me, what is the worst element about this album is not necessarily the length or like the vocal performances. For me, it's more to do with the focus, or rather lack thereof, of this album, because lyrically it's an incredibly messy album. We've got kind of ideas kind of doing this rock star pastiche, which is quite a big topic in hip-hop. Nothing inherently wrong with that. And sometimes it's even kind of a punky pastiche. Sometimes it's more directly trap influenced. Sometimes I don't really get what it's going for. But my ultimate point about this all is that I find the sonic direction of the whole project so lacking of bizarre. To me, it just ultimately becomes a gigantic mess. And I mean, I like songs on here. There are a couple that I think are kind of good, but what ultimately strikes me about this and why it doesn't work is I really don't get going for as like the basic fundamental sonic idea of the album. And I don't necessarily think that's Carti's fault. I think that's almost the fault of the massive hype circles, particularly figures like Mario Judah hyping up the release of this album, which I think has led to it being incredibly rushed feeling. Like, maybe if this had another year in the editing room, we still might not have enjoyed it, but it would have been a more cohesive project. It could have
we would have gotten a die-lit, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it would have gone through like a couple more rounds of production. Like, hey, maybe we shouldn't mix his vocals like 15 decibels higher than the backing track. Maybe that's a good idea. But and maybe we should just cut this down. Maybe it just speaks to me of like needing to push something out and ultimately caving into that pressure, which I think is the biggest tragedy of this album. That maybe it would have been better. Who's to say, really? I mean, maybe in a year there'll be like, or realistically a week, there'll be like a deluxe edition of this that could magically fix these problems, but I don't know.
I don't think it'll fix any of the problems, but I do feel obliged to say there is a deluxe on the way, I believe.
Okay, that's far from surprising.
Yeah.
But that's really what I have to contribute to the conversation.
Okay. Well, I want to preface this by saying that um, when I think Jake was the one who initially said, you know, it might be good to review this or it might be good to discuss this on the podcast. I definitely was hesitant at first because I feared that what it would be is five people listening to something out of their depth and failing to explain its appeal or anything about it, or, you know, it just kind of us being floundering pointlessly. And but that was my initial response. Um, but having sat with this album for a while, I've listened to this, I think, at least 8 or 9 times, maybe.
Jesus Christ.
I just had it on. I've made myself do that. I listened to it in basically almost any context that you would listen to a record, in some context in which you maybe wouldn't. I've listened to it with headphones. I've listened to it while cooking. I've listened to it on speakers in lots of different contexts. I've listened to it while going for a walk. I've listened to it while driving. I've listened to it in the shower. I've listened to it before bed. I don't really know why, because as I've already kind of given the lead away, which is that I think this album is middling, but yet I feel this weird attraction to wanting to understand it and wanting to understand more broadly who Cardi is and what he represents and why people are going so crazy about him. Like, I find the cultural phenomenon surrounding him really fascinating, especially considering that other artists that Jake's already kind of alluded to Travis Scott, who undoubtedly does make, obviously, trap music, but I still feel that Cardi's brand has always been slightly different to what a lot of the pop trappers have always been doing. Really, the only big name who I think is remotely similar to Cardi and what he does is Lil Uzi Vert. And even Uzi doesn't have the same level of feverish adoration and widespread acclaim and fascination from not just people in the trap sphere, but music people more broadly. And yeah, so I kind of been trying to understand this. And I find the story behind this album, which August has already kind of touched on, really fascinating. So I'm going to kind of launch into it, and I'm going to be kind of broad. I'm going to be wide in my scope here because I really want to try and hopefully explain this.
No, I think that's a good approach to do it because you're clearly sitting with four people who like need this to like I'm genuinely, if there's one thing that happened to me when listening to this other than furthering my pretty already fervent dislike, it's mainly just curiosity. Like it isn't even like something with like the movie like Tenet where I just watch this and I'm just like, I don't fucking give a shit anymore. I don't want to understand why people like this. This is boring. This, on the other hand, I'm like, this is so specific. I have to know. I have to know.
I feel like I'm a classics teacher that has been dropped into Rome pre the Rosetta Stone existing.
Yeah. And that's why I think the Tenet a Tenet comparison or a Miami Vice comparison is not really apt, because those are things that people hate because they're artists that they usually like doing something incredibly self-indulgent that uses the tropes of things that they enjoy in a way that they find self-indulgent. Whereas this is just an entirely different universe. Like, there's not anything here that's kind of the seeds of stuff you guys are massively into. It's just all completely different. But anyway, so as part of my journey of trying to like get Cardi, I listened to his first two records, his self-titled mixtape and Die Lit, which I don't care for. Really, I will say Die Lit has kind of grown on me. I think that there are some moments on that record where the production is frankly inspired, and it sounds huge. Songs like Shooter and the intro track on that record, I think, are really
it's got its moments. I feel similarly lukewarm on it, but I agree.
But anyway, A Whole Lot of Red, I think, is a completely different ballgame. The production on this record is purposefully aiming for something darker, more minimal and sleek compared to the flashy and more memorable beats of Die Lit. And that is in combination with the concept of the record, with which Cardi seeks to evoke horror movies, metal music, and punk. Again, all on a purely aesthetic level. And I can hear the eye rolling when I say that. How dare he adopt the aesthetics of these genuinely transgressive artistic movements for his trap shenanigans. But respectfully, I do think that's a stupid complaint. Because there's nothing wrong with adopting the aesthetics of other forms of art, even if all you want to do with that is something that's purely surface level to create a vibe. And I mean,
That's
frankly,
kind of how art works.
exactly.
Yeah,
And frankly,
exactly.
considering
Like,
how many different elements of hip hop culture have been adopted by the white mainstream in the past, I'll give Cardi some artistic license here. And anyway, it's about the music, which is what we're here to judge. Records like Cardi's self-titled mixtape and Dialect, they have their darker moments, undeniably, but they're primarily designed to be purely blissful entertainment, the kind of shit you lose yourself in. Whole Lot of Red takes that feeling of letting go and going apeshit in the club and turns the lights red. It ups the distortion. It relinquishes some of the more playfully light vocal tones that he adopted on those records for a generally darker, growling sound. It does fluctuate across the record, but almost always feels some variety of menacing or threatening. Like he's trying to be the DJ that will murder you if you don't hit the mosh pit with everything you've got. And here, more than ever before, is music that Cardi wants you to mosh to. Throughout the record, he refers to himself as a rock star, and clearly his aim is to give trap music the aesthetic of rock music, the edge, the danger, the sense of willful abandon, without actually sacrificing any of the sonic signifiers of the trap genre. Cardi doesn't want to actually make rock music with guitars and shit. That would be missing the point entirely. If rock music has all but vacated the mainstream public consciousness, and I would argue the Billboard Hot 100 is reasonably strong evidence that it mostly has, then Cardi's aim is for trap to fill that void. He has clear ambitions for the whirlwind history of initially black-driven but eventually white-overwhelmed rock music to be reclaimed once again, forged anew with the sound of the modern era. After all, rock music initially evolved from sounds that were naturally happening in black communities in America in the 40s and 50s, from blues, from soul. And over the past 40 years, the sound of black communities in America has become hip-hop, maybe the dominant cultural art form. And in the past 10 years, as hip-hop sounds and aesthetics have been codified and more broadly accepted by white audiences, the sound of black communities, the sounds that identify them specifically in wider culture, and not simply pitchfork reading, turtleneck hoarding, alt-indie hipsters, has become trap music. Although now you can see Pitchfork endorsing Cardi with Best New Music for his last two records, so perhaps that's even under threat. So as a result, here we are with Whole Lot of Red, arguably the last culturally important musical release of 2020 and an emblem for the state of popular rock music. Again, air quotes there. And coming off the back of Dialect, which was immensely successful and hugely ambitious in its sound, if ultimately bloated and not quite gelling as a whole, it's fair to say that everyone was expecting Cardi to deliver a banner statement, an OK computer of trap, or whatever ludicrous cultural touchstone you want to call it. Which is why it's so frustrating that Whole Lot of Red is not that. And look, as I said before, I think that doing this album on our podcast would be pointless if all we were doing is just needlessly dragging it. And as a result of that, I really wanted to like this record. I really did, just to be the one, who could go against the grain. But I have to ultimately be honest. If I was someone who did, change my opinion purely to go against the grain, I would never be able to forgive myself. And there would be no point in me being here. I have to be completely honest about how I feel about this music. And how I feel about this music is conflicted. It's not that I hate it. It's not that I dislike it. It's not that I like it. It's not that I love it. It's that I'm in this awkward middle state where I like some of it as much as I hate other parts of it. And it didn't have to be this way. And to really get to the heart of why this album is ultimately a noble failure, you have to look at the immediate context of its release. As I said, this was a feverishly anticipated album. Carti's fan base were almost manic and vitriolic in their demand for this album. You can find multiple bootleg records online, compiled from demos that have been leaked in the time since Die Lit, that many fans will tell you now are better than the record they ended up getting. Carti has been put under an immense amount of pressure. He put out, in the eyes of his fans, he put out a masterpiece. Despite the fact, and now you've got to put out another one, despite the fact that the shit you're working on is getting constantly leaked and thus ruined for you. So you have to abandon it and create new shit and somehow still keep everyone happy. Fans rapidly absorb the leaks and grow attached to them, so that any finished version you give them will feel like it's been spoiled for you as an artist and will likely just disappoint your fans anyway. Not to mention the fact that it has only been 2 years since your last album, which in the rock world is a bare footnote, but in the hip-hop world is an eternity. In that respect, you can see Carti's frustration with the trappings of the hip-hop sphere and his desire to move beyond it culturally while retaining the core sound. Then, all on top of that, you enter this curious figure by the name of Mario Judah. Judah goes viral for a vaguely new metal / Evanescence inspired trap banger called Die Very Rough, where he promises in a hilariously melodramatic falsetto to murder you and eat you like a big bear, a big dog, and a lion at the same time. It is hilarious, and it's instantly memed for days. And Judah becomes huge, and he follows it up by revealing his real ambitions. He's a Carti obsessive. He is fucking Annie Wilkes-in Misery level. And he wants to use his viral fame to pressure the release of Whole Lotta Red at any cost. He labels himself a rock star, though curiously, he distances himself from rockstar mode while he's haranguing Carti, which I think shows a hilarious misunderstanding of what Carti is trying to do, despite being such a huge fan. And Judah issues Carti an ultimatum: deliver the album or I will do it for you. When Carti is silent, Judah releases a Carti impersonation track that's hilariously on the money while still being jokey and parodic. Carti fans lap it up. They have their champion. Judah promises to release more songs in this vein every week if Carti doesn't drop the album. Carti's fans seem to like Judah's track as much as the real thing, and just like that, the ravenous Twitter mob are threatening to throw Carti into irrelevance for the crime of not releasing an album. So Carti folds. Whole Lotta Red is released on Christmas Day, and I would say about 70% of fans instantly bag it. It's trash. It sucks. The demos were better. Carti is past it. Hilariously, now that a few weeks have gone by since then, and the internet has actually turned on Mario Judah for being a one-trick pony who's now irrelevant himself, fans are going back to Carti and giving the album another chance. And I'm not trying to paint this narrative to, defend Carti's album or anything. I just feel like there's a lot of context here that's so interesting and informs so much of the experience of listening to it. And I have to say two things in relation to what the fans have said. The demos for this album that leaked, which I have gone and checked out, are not uniformly better than this album. Some are great, but most sound exactly like what they are, demos. And the second thing I have to say is that, unfortunately, a number of tracks on Whole Lotta Red sound like demos as well. The musical aesthetic of the blown-out bass sound, to me, is like the aesthetic of the slasher movies that are drenched in bright red blood in every scene. And to me, these two things accomplish the same thing. They feel and that comparison feels of a piece with what Carti is trying to do in a way that it doesn't always in more irreverent iterations of the sound that lack the drive Carti has as a performer, or the concept that he's trying to pull off here as well, the horror movie. He may sound initially like he's merely mumbling or scatting his way through these songs, but I do have to for the most part, defend Carti's vocal performance on this record. I think he does have an incredibly versatile voice that he deploys quite purposefully to color his delivery. It is not going to work for anyone. And it's really, like, it's already been said beautifully by other people that the extent to which you find it compelling is really comes down to your own individual preferences from art and the types of transgressive stuff in terms of vocal performances that you enjoy versus that you find obnoxious. But I do think, I mean, personally for me, I think that Carti's really versatile vocally on this record. His lyrical style and inflection is unmistakable. He uses short, fragmented phrases and he beats them into your brain through sheer repetition. And again, to me, the bluntness and the crudeness of this approach is akin to the kind of the way that you might see violence presented in a slasher movie, or the pummeling of a good drummer in a metal band. Not that all these things are as aesthetically pleasing, but just that they have the same kind of intention and effect. Trap music has never been about lyrical substance. Carti doesn't pretend for a second that it is. Carti uses his lyrics and his voice, and he wields them like a weapon to batter the listener about. And I completely understand resenting and hating artists who try to do that, who try to kind of like bully their audience or you know, create an unpleasant environment. When he wheezes, "jump out the house," or when he moans, "metamorphosis," over and over, he wedges these words in your brain to try and evoke the two primary feelings of this album: the violent partying that the music wants you to do, and also the musical evolution Carti's trying to use his prominent status in the culture to push. The beats are rudimentary here. There are some tracks that have genuine flair and an addictive catchiness through their instrumentals alone, before Carti even jumps on. Slayer in particular comes to mind with these nice chopped up vocal samples and double time trap hi-hats. I put this on and it's impossible for me not to move to it. I love it. Teen X sees Future jump on board this weirdly dreamy but also kind of eerie looping beat as Carti bludgeons into your brain about how he's on X and coding. Stop Breathing is another highlight to me. The bass is absurdly heavy on this track, as has been acknowledged. And Carti paints this nightmare picture of fucking a groupie who overdoses and dies in front of him, as Carti shrieks about how his brother's death has him contemplating a murder spree. I mean, to me, to get upset at any of these lyrics is like getting upset at Norman Bates for murdering. Like, the whole point is the vibe and the atmosphere and the character that Carti is portraying. This is his horror movie where drug binging and ugly death are inevitable harsh realities, and your enjoyment or your ability to get on board with that will be related to the extent to which you enjoy that as a concept for a record. And of course, the horror is obviously the horror of these things, particularly of the endless drug references, is made more tangible and effective by how close it is to the real reality of opiate pill abuse. Like the best horror, it has a real life subtext that Carti doesn't need to point out to us. We don't need to linger in the tragedy and the aftermath of the tragedy. The whole album is about the adrenaline rush of the moment, the adrenaline rush of the high happening, of the violence in your head, of the moment in the slasher movie where you see the knife go into the person's chest. But this focus, this whole thing where Cudi to me seems to be trying to evoke that adrenaline rush moment with this album, that's where you get to the record's most noticeable flaws. Now, generally speaking, I don't love having to harangue a record just for being too long, because I feel like it's a boring criticism. But nevertheless, it's so often the case when we review stuff, and it's, you know, when it's true, it's true. You can't get around it. And so I really want to get to the heart of why Whole Lotta Red being 63 minutes is something that actively hurts its main priorities. Not just something that makes it, you know, intolerable as a listening experience for many people, but something that actually goes against, I think, what it's trying to do. You could make the argument that Carti intends this length to be deliberately fatiguing, to beat you into submission. But in reality, the briskness and the punch of its most effective tracks is dulled by their formulaic reiteration. Carti does stagger the best material across this album, I think, such that it's neither front nor back loaded. But the bloat is painful. And again, it did not have to be this way. A lot of the weaker tracks here are not weak because their ideas are bad. They're weak because they're underdeveloped. They weirdly meander. They end abruptly. And rather than continuing the flow of Carti's wild, blood-splattered party, they just jaggedly start and stop. Additionally, this is a record that famously has 23 producers versus the majority of the production work being handled just by Pierre Bourne on Die Lit. And as a result, you have a record of cobbled together sounds, some of them great, primal and electric, but many of them stale, weirdly limp, and seeming to serve solely as unnecessary connective tissue. Pre-release single Meh invites ridicule from the title as it iterates yet another dull, plinking phone dial beat that's better displayed elsewhere on the record. The Kanye feature on Go to the Moon is hilariously bad. Seriously, Kanye. If you're going to drop a bar like, you always asking for Buddha, you are Budapest, why would you not make it like, you hungry for Buddha, you are Budapest, or something? Something where the pun is actually tangible, even though it's still corny as fuck. It's like, Kanye is at this point in his career where he does either one of two things when he raps. He has these really half-baked, shitty fucking bars about, like that, or like one of the innumerable terrible bars about getting head on the Yay record. Or the other thing he does is he just says this really inane thing and he stretches the end of it out like na 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 na. Those are the two things that Kanye does now, and they both suck ass. And I get it. I know what you're thinking. You're like, well, Tyler, the shit that Carti does in this record is just as annoying as that. And fair fucking game. But at least what Carti does is in aesthetic concert with everything else happening on the record. Kanye just does not fit here at all. And it's so annoying that this song, obviously it's annoying that the song is even on the record, because I think also the chopped up string sample on this track sounds stilted and flat. It's just a bad song. It's annoying that it's on here, but it's even more annoying that it's in the second track position, because I actually really love the opening track. I think the beat's great, and I think it's really aggressive. If you listen to Die Lit and then you listen to this straight away and you go into the Rockstar Made, it's immediately apparent how Carti has shifted his sound and what he's trying to do to differentiate the two records. And then you just get like him shooting himself in the fucking foot with the second song. Just the sequencing on this album is really a missed opportunity. Anyway, fuck, that's an awful song. On That Time is probably the most distorted track on the record. It sounds like it was produced by Dylan Brady, but it also has none of the character that the best music that he produces often has. And it just, as a result, you just get something. So look, and I get what Jake says about the distortion on this record sounded terrible, because I get that. For me, sometimes at its best, the level of distortion has a visceral hit to it that it's like noise music, you know what I mean? It has the same level of appeal. But I also think that there's a way of doing that well, like on Rockstar Made or Stop Breathing, which is even more kind of goes further in that level. And there's a way of doing it that falls flat, and that is On That Time, where the distortion is just turned up so much that it feels like, again, it's completely going against every other element of the song. The bass distortion on this record would not work if Carti was in a singy, swoony mode that he often adopted on Die Lit. It works because he's growling and scratching and yelping on this album in a way that's really visceral and unsettling, and works with the kind of persona he's built and is trying to get across with the concept of the record, this evil kind of thing. But it's just buried in distortion on a song like On That Time, to the point where it feels entirely pointless. The run on the back half of the album from King Vamp to Not Playing is an absolute fucking flatline. 7 consecutive tracks that barely ignite. I will say some of them have occasionally a couple cool musical ideas. I like the juddering beat and the fried G-funk squeal of I Love You, I Hate You, but the previously animated Carti sounds fucking half asleep here. Sky has a twisted melodic beat that's kind of cool, but it sounds like a first draft. And then the next track over basically does the exact same thing as this song, except it's noisier, it's fuzzier, and Cudi has even less of a presence on it. There are some other highlights that I do enjoy that I've not yet mentioned. Though I hate the spoken word intro on this song about how long fans have been waiting, Control does have a nicely
I
fuzzy,
did like that one.
Yeah, Control has a nicely fuzzy and clattering beat. And I think that actually Cudi does get away with being a little bit more dreamy in his vocal turns on this song, because it has an unsettling tinge to it that I think works.
I thought that's particularly why that worked. That song in particular worked quite well, because it's the time on the record where it feels like everyone involved in the craft of the track kind of knows what the final product. It feels like it has a very solid direction to it. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, Cudi is really, this is one of the most, and I'm not saying, and again, I said earlier that trap is not about lyrical substance, and Cudi is not really interested in lyrical substance. But I will say that Control does have a little bit of lyrical insight into Cudi's state of mind. He does ask tiresomely on this track, what do you want from me? I can get on my knees and speak properly. But ultimately, he concedes that him doing this would be betraying himself and where he comes from, a place where people don't speak like that, where people speak and sound like him on this record. And it's a heartfelt and direct moment on the record that's needed, and it still stays true to the album's anti-hero character approach, a figure who has as many moments of clarity and realization as he does drug-fueled, violent impulses. New Neon has a similarly blissed out beat that would have fit right in on Die Lit, and the hilarious Punk Monk sees the reclusive Cudi demanding to be left alone over a distorted and rippling beat that I think serves as a neat match to his messed up state of mind that he talks about on the track, being unable to trust anyone and ultimately lapsing into self-loathing. Honestly, and bear with me here, he feels like a Scorsese protagonist on this track. Like this distancing, like it really struck me the last time I listened to it.
I was literally going to bring up a Scorsese film when talking about one of the other points you made about this album.
Like on Punk Monk, he sounds like Henry Hill in the car looking for the helicopters. Like that's just the fucking energy he brings, and I find that fucking invigorating. I just wish it was more consistently gripping, like it is on that track, for me anyway. And here's another point that's worth raising as well. Cudi is rapping on Whole Lotta Red a lot more than he ever has before. While there's plenty of the slogan repetition that defined the first two projects on here, on tracks like Punk Monk and Control, you do get Cudi trying to communicate himself in more detail and trying to let us in deeper than he ever has before. And I think that's to be commended. And honestly, that was one of the things that left me at a distance from his previous records, was how much he relied on the slogan style, the repetitive slogan style, whereas I think that's deployed here well on tracks like Metamorphosis and benefits from the juxtaposition with the more of a rapping style on other songs. The closing track, Feel Like Dying, with its jarring, pitch-shifted Bon Iver sample, sounds almost like a James Blake track with a trap beat. And it's a fitting finale to the record, I think. It sounds almost bittersweet and reflective, but also it leaves the impression that Carti's just getting started, which is why, again, it's so infuriating that this record was so clearly rushed. that the important and interesting concept that Carti adopted, this idea of trying to drag trap music as into the world of rock, like wanting trap stars to be the new rock stars, basically. An important and interesting idea that I think is really culturally interesting is so half-baked on this record. And it makes me so, and I'm not saying that the blame is not to be put on Carti at all for this, because obviously it's Carti's responsibility to put out his record. He's ultimately responsible for it. But following the rabid toxicity of the fans in the lead up to this, and then listening to this, I just feel a sense of missed opportunity. Whole Lotta Red comes frustratingly close to greatness in its best moments, but is bogged down under the weight of unrealized potential. A friend of mine, Connor, described Whole Lotta Red as being like a hardcore record where every track is a quick shot of energy rather than a fully structured song. And I get that, and I don't necessarily completely agree with that, although I do think that's what Carti is trying to go for. But again, I come back to the same kind of textbook, maybe boring criticisms that we often have. This thing would be so much more effective if it were 10 tracks shorter. And if some of the shorter tracks that show promise, like I Love You, I Hate You, were more fleshed out. And so, yeah, and ultimately I think the issues are best summed up by the first two tracks, as I've already said. Rockstar Made, a definitive, declarative statement of purpose. Whether you enjoy it or not, it's kind of impossible to deny it is the statement of purpose for the record. And Go to the Moon coming right after it. I have no doubt that Carti has in him the potential to make something that does feel like a definitive statement on the future of trap music, as well as being a turn your brain off, thoroughly enjoyable thrill ride from start to finish. And I wanted this record to be that so bad. But yeah, I think until generally listeners start appreciating what makes music great, what actually makes the stuff they enjoy so good, then it's like by demanding things like this of Carti, by creating and feeding an environment where this kind of thing is conditioned and reinforced, you're going to continue to get artists like this shooting themselves in the foot. And I feel like it's important that that is said at this juncture in musical culture, because we're going down the fucking rabbit hole with artists releasing multiple albums in a year, with artists bulking their records up with shit. And it's like, it would be so easy to make this better. But it's like, people don't want that. General music listeners don't want it. And it makes me so mad. Because you don't get to say that you don't want to wait and then fucking complain when the shit comes out half-baked. You don't get to have it both fucking ways. Yeah.
Well, I say here.
I've been thinking about it a lot the last few days, and I guess basically that's where I'm at.
No, I was just going to say, I think that basically you have created the best point that makes me at least understand why I, and who could theoretically latch on to something like this, and other people don't like it, and just because it's like, from a creation standpoint, because it's designed against itself. It's at odds with itself. It's basically an Ouroboros in a way. So it's like, I understand that now. What I don't understand though is the people who still latch on to it. Then they still confuse me, but then I think you have sort of come about in a roundabout way of saying that, like, these are the people that I'm seeing are the people who are the annoying assholes who badgered him to release this and be impatient, and they'll never be happy with anything, and they're trying to like leak all these things, and they're just like, they would enjoy it no matter what it was. It would just be released, and it's just like it's the idea of this album that is so intoxicating.
Yes. And that's the thing that I've noticed on Twitter a lot, is that with artists like this, and it's not even limited to trap or hip hop, in fact it's kind of ballooning into music generally, is that it's almost never actually about the music. It's about the aesthetics of the music. It's about how liking or disliking the music might make you be perceived by other people. It's about all of these secondary, shallow, horseshit things. That's music Twitter. It's not really about talking about what makes music great. It's about fucking posturing.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you this. Now that Tyler has explained just what the hell went on with this release, I am reminded of a similar experience, but in a completely different medium, that also happened at the tail end of last year, that of Cyberpunk 2077. So, for the uninitiated, essentially what happened was Cyberpunk was a game that the developers CD Projekt Red were hyping up for the last 8 years. Like one of the most hotly anticipated games of all time. And it's hard not to see why. It's practically a dream game, and we don't really have anything occupying its exact space before it. At least nothing accessible. So they delayed the game many times, even just this year. I think they had delayed it twice just this year. And it got to the point where it was just getting memed and dunked on, and everybody was just like, where's the game, CD Projekt Red? You're just going to delay it again. Can't wait to play it in 2077 for real. So, naturally, it was hit with a December 10th final release date, and for the most part, on PC and next-gen consoles, it plays fine. But on the base consoles, on the consoles that it was advertised for, on the thing that people, who didn't have $1,200 to shell out for a high-end PC were going to play it on, it is absolutely not functional. It doesn't play to such a degree that the Xbox store is offering refunds and the PlayStation store is offering refunds and has pulled it from their store entirely. It's perhaps the most disastrous launch in game history since E.T. in 1982.
Jesus.
Which is a crying shame, because last I checked, I have now put 70 hours into it. Because I was lucky enough to get a PlayStation 5, so despite the crashes, it runs very well. And I just haven't stopped playing it since I got my hands on it. It's an experience that scratches an itch that I haven't gotten fully scratched since probably Skyrim. It's a very specific sort of kind of game, and it scratches that itch way better than any games since Skyrim that have actually done that. And I think it's an amazing experience that was completely obliterated by people who no longer wanted to wait for a finished product. Because this is a stain on CD Projekt Red's history for the rest of their existence. It was nothing less than a disaster. And it's a damn shame, because they made a fantastic game. And like Tyler said about Carti, it is ultimately on them that they didn't, give it the time that they needed, that the game needed to actually be finished and playable. But the hype culture of entitlement, no matter how long you had to wait for anything, that culture of entitlement is, I think it's slowly eroding proper artistic releases. Especially considering that with both albums, historically, see Life of Pablo, and games in general, you can just release a patch once it's done. it's a sort of idea that the masses of people seem to be encouraging, even though it is clearly, directly, visibly harmful to the experience overall. To such a degree that, it'll probably be 6 months before people with PS4 can play Cyberpunk properly. And even then, it'll be rough.
Yeah.
But all of this entire tangent is to say that I have serious concerns about how things are being released now, specifically in regards to the hype culture around them.
It's just the whole way that people consume art in general is so toxic
exactly.
and entitled.
It's
Like
instantaneous and it's
today,
just...
today I was listening to just out on a driving lesson. One of my favorite movie radio shows was on, and they were talking about the new Wonder Woman movie. And they were talking about how they had, how awful it is to go a year without, and I quote, a superhero fix. And I just found that this is like people I respect saying this, and I found it just so horribly depressing because I remember a time where I didn't have a superhero movie every 3 months.
I'm sorry, I need to stop you right there. Just read a comic book.
Yeah,
I
fucking entered my head.
I mean,
but it's like,
God, that makes me want to walk into the ocean.
They're talking about this in relation to Wonder Woman 84, to the extent that people are putting all of this expectation on it for being like the first Marvel film in a year, and it's like, don't do that. Why is anyone doing that? Most movies take time to be made. What the fuck are you talking about?
What it is, and the reason they won't read a comic book is it's not about superhero fix. It's about wanting to see your faves do this specific thing that you've wanted to see them doing, that you've harangued creatives to basically dictate the happening of.
Snyder Cut.
Yeah, exactly.
It's gone from interest to fetishistic. And to the point where you do not latch on to something or the culture of something because of your specific preference, but that you demand from the culture itself to cater to you, which is disastrously toxic to the idea of creating art within that culture.
I was just going to say something about something small that Tyler said, and it's just to elucidate my experience a bit more, outside of just dunking on it. And it's to do with the album being comparable to like a slasher picture in terms of the extremity of the violence and sort of the style then being a visceral experience. And I wish to qualify my opinion for the people at home, because you all know me. I'm going to say this for the people at home. I wrote my dissertation on giallo films. Got a first. The book that I hit myself with earlier as a goof is a textbook on Lucio Fulci. And I'm sitting across from my vinyl collection, in which there is a vinyl, the soundtrack of Cannibal Holocaust. So I feel kind of qualified when I say that what Tyler was describing felt to me like the difference between, I don't know, Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer, or maybe more accurately American Psycho, and something like The Boondock Saints. And if we're going more artsy, and specifically in gangsterism, that's why I talked about Martin Scorsese earlier, like The Irishman compared to The Boondock Saints, where the violence is pushed so far that it's like a commentary on it. American Psycho does that amazingly. But just by existing in the world, I've consumed my fair share of like trap music. And almost everything he says in this record, I've seen someone else somewhere say, like unironically, as a form of posturing, because they're not actually doing those things. They're saying they are as a form of, and that's something that hip hop, to its great credit, has done very effectively, and music in general, and rock music has done really effectively for decades. But like, satire needs to feel different from the things it's pushing against for me to understand that's what it's doing. So if you engage on it on that level, that's really great. I'm really happy for you. I will never have that experience. And that's probably a shame and a bad thing for me.
I think it sounds different in a way that is. I think it does sound different. I just think that it sounds different by virtue of the fact that it doesn't sound good. Like, I think that's just sort of where I can't meet it full
Yeah, the music's different. I've heard
blast.
lots of trap that I think is much better produced and like sounds better.
No, yeah, that's what I'm saying. But like, it's more that like his approach could work as this thing. Like, I think it's like what Tyler said. This is an album that is like I feel is again, if this album were successful, I still wouldn't love it, but I would be a lot more on board with it. My real gripe with it, the thing that keeps this from being like a 5 out of 10 or even like a 6 or whatever the fuck if you want to get semantic about it, the thing that keeps it from that is that I still don't feel like it's achieving its individual goals well. It's both suffering by virtue of the fact that it is not something that I like generally, and it is something that I like that I don't like that is done poorly. It's a nexus
get
of
you.
both of these things.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I'm just a little bit more nuanced for me than that, because it's like I think about half of this does achieve its goals really well. It's just the fact that half of it doesn't, and it's bogging it down.
I don't think it's like. Well, I mean, okay. Maybe I didn't put this as clearly as I could. It's really just the fact that it's like. I don't disagree that like some of it like is achieved that way. It's just that I disagree in the sense that I think that the way it's done and the way that it's so fluffy and malformed makes it boring instead of abrasive.
I mean, like, what I would say is
if it was abrasive, then it would be something.
Well,
and
yeah,
it's
like,
not.
I mean, I would just like to say, like, if we're talking about albums that sound like nothing we've ever heard before, that was like me when we reviewed Black Dresses last year, and look at me. And like there are the things I don't like about this record. I have almost all of them loved in other records when done in very similar ways, just separate from each other. And I genuinely think that Playboy Carti is a personality that could easily release a record I fall head over heels for, even based on this record. It's just not this one.
Yeah, I see this record as of a kind of a kinship with the Black Dresses album in some respects musically, but like I think ultimately Saoirse, and for the rest of you, and I guess for me, and to a certain extent as well, it just comes down to the extent to which you find the character in question compelling. And Saoirse, obviously, you have a really personal connection to the Black Dresses record that you talked about.
That's a very good point. It's a very good point.
And obviously, none of us have very personal connections to being opiate addicted party people necessarily. Not to presume anything, but
I'm a
crackhead.
But yeah, I think ultimately perceptions of the success of this record.
User.
I think ultimately our perceptions of the success of this record are kind of just going to be irreconcilable, because I think that, for example, I think Stop Breathing is a fantastic execution of the whole concept of this record. I wish more songs were like it, but I know that won't change the fact that Jake finds it intolerable, and that's just where we're at.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. Absolutely.
All right, let's move on then to our favorite tracks and ratings for those of us who have them for this album. Jake. Favorite tracks and or rating?
2 out of 10.
2 out of 10. Okay, cool. August.
Okay, so that's August. Yeah.
All right, favorite tracks. The first one, the one Kid Cudi was on, and Control. Least favorite track, it could be about fucking any of the other ones. 3 out of 10.
So that's Morgan.
Yeah, I'm not going to belabor the point. 2 out of 10.
So that's me. If I was to pick out 2, I could really say you got Vamp, Anthem, and Metamorphosis. My least favorite track is probably Slayer. When I go to sleep, I dream about murder. It was good for you. You know. I'm going to give this record 0.5 out of 10. Which is my first one ever on the podcast, for the record.
Rest in peace.
Yeah,
Mr.
fair
Carti.
enough. Go. Good for you.
Get fucked. Get
My-
fucked, Smashing Pumpkins.
I'm not gonna lie, that hurts. The Smashing Pumpkins getting a higher.
I noticed today that you have the Green Day album of last year at 1 star and Skeleton Coast at a 0.5 star. So it's a similar feeling that we're experiencing.
No, that's totally fair, actually. My favorite tracks on Whole Lotta Mid, is that joke done? Are
Got him.
surprisingly difficult to pick. If I'm only doing 3, I'll say Rockstar.
Embarrassment of riches, truly.
I'll say Rockstar Made, Stop Breathing, and Slayer. Sure, why not? Worst track on the record, I think, is Sky, and I'm going to give the album a 5 out of 10.
Nice. So that is
I like that album a lot better when it was Triple X by Danny Brown.
wow. That's such a good point. That's 2.5 on average, and the only 2 other records we've done to get a 2.5 is Revival and Recovery.
Better, it is measurably better than both of those.
Oh, I don't
Maybe.
fucking care enough to think about that.
I just want to say as well, on the note of Slayer, that's something that we never talked about. It's just how funny it is to say, I'm a rock star, I could have been in Slayer. Like, Slayer? Slayer.
That's such a fucking strange, like, if you're gonna go with, like, any of the big 4, you go with Slayer, huh?
Slayer.
I mean even
Yeah,
Megadeth makes more fucking sense.
I could have been an emo star. I should have been in the front bottoms. Like,
I think it's like just it's supposed to be like an analog because of like, the whole hip hop thing of like slaying the puss and stuff.
right? Yeah.
I'm sorry, what? What was it?
Let's not make him say it again. I don't.
Oh, I think I very much want to.
You can play it back. I'll leave that in.
It approaches cruelty.
All right, let's move on.
To me, not to him.
Speaking of approaching cruelty.
Sorry, I just want to shout out on the we're going to talk about Kid Cudi's new album now, which on our music podcast spreadsheet, August has going to assume it's August, has changed to Man on the Moon 3, From Fear Through the Eyes of Madness.
Oh, I wish.
I tip my hat.
But it's called Man on the Moon 3, The Chosen. Not The Chosen One, The Chosen.
It is a sequel, the final in a trilogy. Well, I guess not in a final because of the way it ends, but it is the third entry in the what is right now the Man on the Moon trilogy, the original Man.
It's truly the Back to the Future 3 of the trilogy. Like, it's a good analog, I think.
You've lost more. Sorry.
Better than 2?
No, it's the worst one, but it's okay. It's bad analog because I do like Back to the Future 3, but I just think it's like not as good as the first 2.
Well, here's the thing about Kid Cudi, which I am going to take upon myself to relate to because nobody here is a fucking massive fan of Kid Cudi. This is
do the best job.
Yeah, this is kind of this is like a Cardi situation, sort of. Except here's the thing: is that I enjoy the previous 2 Man on the Moon entries. I don't think either of them are amazing or even like great. I find Cudi to be I guess I'm going to take over Tyler's role on the last one here, is that I find Cudi to be a phenomenally frustrating artist, and that, like, in principle and often in approach, I love what he's going for, and I love what he's doing, and I love the reckless abandon with which he executes many of his concepts. It's just that, like most true mavericks, they do be missing as much as they hit, and sometimes they miss a lot more, and that's kind of where old Cudster kind of exists right now.
Like imagine you're a filmmaker who gets every other scene perfect, and then you adapt Lord of the Rings.
No, like Cudi is just. I'm gonna fucking be straight up here. Cudi, I love the first Man on the Moon record. I actually think it's a great album. I think it's front to back really fucking good. Everything else he's done since then has either been mid or shit. I don't. Well,
No, yeah,
Kids See
I
Ghosts
agree.
is good.
Yeah,
but like
we can cast aside Kids See Ghosts because Kids See Ghosts is clearly two
it's a
very
weird curio.
volatile artists meeting each other and accentuating what makes them good, and also knowing when to fucking stop. But
I'm at the point where with Kid Cudi, where it's like I'm not convinced he has any talent anymore.
well, I thought you were gonna. I didn't know how early you were going to stop, but I actually, I do kind of agree with this. I think that it's really this album, which is far. Let me stress this. Far from the worst thing he's ever made. Like, barely even, it would not even be bottom three, frankly. Because he's turned out stuff like the notoriously awful Speeding Bullet to Heaven. He's also done things that are just mind-numbingly awful, that are just like, it's Passion, Pain, and Demon Slaying, where it's just like drinking NyQuil for 2 hours. And you just, you wonder why anyone was ever interested in this dude. And then you go back, and at least I did, and I listened to stuff like Man on the Moon 1 and 2. And Man on the Moon 1 and 2 are, their mileage is going to vary. It's like Dial-It, in that I think it is a pretty amazing version of what it is trying to be, but your mileage is going to vary with it just because it's strange. Because Cudi does not approach genre or traditional, like, music the way that a lot of his contemporaries do. His flow is often super duper subdued and sometimes just fucking stagnant. His approach to production is often incredibly overbearing or just leans super far into psychedelia and just has like tinges of hip hop. It like barely even skirts around its like main appeal genre, and occasionally it is an outlier stylistically and formally. But a lot of it works, and a lot of why I tolerate some of the things that I like. I used to be a lot more hot on Man on the Moon 1 than I am now, and it's really more that his specific idiosyncrasies have grown off of me, and that it's just like a lot of his deliveries, it's just like I want him to sound like he's more there. I want him to stop being a little bit less like rambly and awkward. But a lot of his awkwardness is his appeal in the sense that he is 100,000% emotionally honest, even at his worst places. He is this very revealing, very hard on his sleeve, very honest, and very empathetic person who is just like, this is who I am and this is what I do. And the thing about Man on the Moon that got people, not just me, into these projects is that they are projects where he blends his interesting approach to sound and a very, very personal and semi-autobiographical tale. The appeal of Man on the Moon 1 and 2 is a guy portraying a normal life like he is a superhero. He is pretending to be Superman, and he is framing his life like he is this god, and he's doing it in a self-critical way where he knows all of his flaws, but he is making himself up to be this person who's overcoming these trials and tribulations, and he's talking about his life and when he was a kid and when he was like his problems with his family, with his mom, and it's just like you want to root for him, basically. And then this entire last decade has been him floundering about from project to project, trying to explore different facets of its sound and doing it mostly unsuccessfully. And then this album comes along, and it's just like, oh, okay, maybe he's going to rein himself in and focus himself, because Man on the Moon 1 and 2 are, I feel like even the most diehard Cudi people would, like, never, ever in a million years put any of his projects above those two. I think it stands head and shoulders above the rest of his work. And then you have Man on the Moon 3 here, which is the most frustrating Cudi project to date, in that it is nowhere near his worst, it is nowhere near his best. It is him doing away with a lot of his idiosyncrasies that are annoying, that are on his earlier work, and as a result, he sands off all of the edges of the work that made him interesting artistically to begin with, and we have this album which is frustratingly fine. It is an album that it struggles its whole way to be interesting, and God bless it. It has moments. I think that the like beautiful trip it begins. It's this very short thing. Resonant synths, lonely tone setter, pretty sounding. I think overall the album sounds for the most part pretty fucking good. A lot of his projects do when he's a bit more focused. Tequila Shots, theatrical start, reminiscent of other Man on the Moon projects. Cudi singing, which has been tumultuous throughout his discography. Here, pretty good. More on like Kids See Ghost. Probably better even. It's a song about the pressure that's on him personally and album-wise, just the expectation of delivering something like this. Everything about this track sounds great, but like the "This War in Me" refrain hook feels kind of weak and flatly delivered, and the song's progression just is not impressive, and I don't not enjoy it, but like it's just like I just should be listening to another song of his. She Knows This. That's a song that has a pretty satisfying beat that feels pretty atypical of Cudi. I just wish his delivery was as cold and menacing as it was on the tracks on Kids See Ghosts. But thankfully, he does change it up on things here, thematically. The track just lacks ambition, and that's what's disappointing and makes this the weakest of the trilogy for me, is that this album is completely lacking in personal narrative and ambition almost entirely, and it backloads all of its interesting content. Another Day, vibes from Man on the Moon 1 here, Cudi's flow, flat. Song does all the heavy lifting for him, production. The hi-hats are really buried under the mix here, not even sure why they're there. It just kind of meanders. Dive starts with these lonely synth organs and these dissonant guitars. I like how he's still trying to incorporate the rock influence, albeit it's not as strong as it was on the last two records. But Cudi has a bit more energy on Dive, but the track's, again, lack of ambition just undoes it. Damaged. For a song about going hard, it's weirdly boring and just kind of lame. It doesn't sound as good as the songs that came before it, and the sentiment of being a damaged man feels trite, frankly, and even for him, who is awkward and very plain with a lot of his lyrical deliveries, he makes up for it in charm and chutzpah, but here, it's just not there. Heaven on Earth starts out with this very interesting twinkly music box loop. Sounds very nice. Sounds like he's trying to be more personal here, but his delivery just, again, it lacks enthusiasm. I know his vibe is to be this drug-addled, hazy kind of music, but it lacks impact that his earlier shit had. Like, the song that features MGMT on his first album is a fucking banger, but it also has this really smooth, silky, psychedelic vibe. The layered vocals in the middle of the song sound really weird when you combine it with how clear the loop sounds. Show Out immediately sounds more energetic, starting with this like revving hard bass beat, super menacing. I think Skepta and Pop Smoke bring some energy to this track that Cudi himself lacks. And as a result, it's a bit more interesting, and I am a bit more here. Mr. Solo Dolo 3, a sequel to his other songs by similar names. Immediately, production, way more intoxicating than before. This like ambient lush synth passage and just sort of makes this wave across this distorted humming, and I like the way his vocals are layered here. It makes up for his really subdued flow, but it achieves the vibe that he's going for better than anything else on here in a way that I would expect from him. If every song was this good, we would be looking at a project that it'd be at least more appreciative of, I guess. Sad People. Lyrically awkward in places, musically satisfying enough, if a bit too subtle with its details. I wish the production's backing beat was quieter, so that stuff like the synths and ad-libs and distant keyboards were more present in the mix. It's pleasant while it's on, but it's slight. Elsie's Baby Boy. Stand By Me sample. Stop it. It is in keeping with Cudi's hard-on-sleeve approach to his work, but, like, no, don't stop this. I object to this on principle. But the song itself, finally, a song that shows some depth that is reminiscent of what he's known for. Tribute to Cudi's mother. It's got this looping guitar chord progression, nice wispy set of production around this that changes up with every verse. One of the standout cuts on here. September 16th, more in-depth thematically and Cudi's state of mind with end issues, but it's a good Cudi song on autopilot. The whole album, basically. The Void, catchy, feels like it earns its place on the track list. Catchy enough hook even though the delivery is labored, but again, most of his stuff is pretty labored. Lovin' Me, more impassioned vocals from Cudi this time. Pleading to God, he's got way more urgency here, and his singing is solid. Very sweet vocal harmonies, very satisfying beat. Phoebe Bridgers, of course, shows up on this track. Kills it absolutely. Vocal harmonies and delivery in general are just better than what Cudi is doing on this whole album. Like, if you make this album over again with Phoebe Bridgers doing all of the things that Cudi is doing, you have a better album, which is just mind-blowing to me. Like, give me a fucking Phoebe Bridgers album produced by Kid Cudi. Something, like, it's something interesting, for fuck's sake.
No, thank you.
Yeah, I gotta
look. I'm talking about this in reference to this album.
I know. I just had to be a dick there and say that would suck.
Well, I mean, I think we're all leaning into a little bit here. So,
The Pale Moonlight, very boilerplate track, even by this album's standards. Rockstar Nights, Trippy Red brings some life here, but this is just the world's most boring Travis Scott song with a limp-ass chorus. For the Kids, thematically feels like Cudi in his element again, writing at its strongest and more inspirational ode to the youth that he's clearly experienced and looking back on. It's got a pretty bog-standard chorus, but I like what it's doing. And then there's the closer, Lord I Know. Interesting beat, weak writing, his delivery really wears thin. It's just kind of a limp ending to a limp album. It's just him on autopilot, carried by maybe some of his most consistent production to date, but like it's just a flat line, honestly.
what the hell's going on with your face, Tyler?
Sorry.
What's wrong with your face?
Just trying to fix the lighting and just.
It's my favorite episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Amazing disappearing album.
God, can't wait for everyone's faces to look completely normal on this podcast.
To address what Jake said, just real quick. Yes.
Yes.
I knew this was going to be the album that people had the least to say about, so
I have
right,
a note. I tend to make notes song by song, but I have one at the top, like above any song. And it's a reference to a Parks and Rec scene where he says, don't half-ass two things, whole-ass one thing. And the note is, don't half-ass 18 songs, whole-ass 10.
Yes, Saoirse.
Like, thing is, okay, I guess I don't like this. Wait, I guess let me rephrase it. I guess I don't hate this. No, never mind. Fuck, words. I guess I hate this more than Jake. But I don't
really hate this at all. I just...
Right.
Well, the thing is, so he definitely hates it more than you then.
Yeah. Well, I guess, okay. There's nothing like offensively bad on this. Sure. But there's no song on here that's good. I don't even think there's any fucking song on here that has potential, frankly. It just sounds so like, if this was some dude who wasn't already big, no one would fucking give a shit. Like, this album is it sounds like he fucking recorded it while he was fucking half asleep. Like, there's no ideas on this thing. I don't have any interesting things to say. It's just so fucking devoid of it. I said, let's review the Kid Cudi because like we had a blank space this week. I'm like, we should fill it with something people are going to want to be interested in hearing what we have to say about. Oh, it was a reasonably big album. I seen all this shit before listening to it. And as soon as I listened to it, I'm like, why? Why did I say this? Because this album is it's the fucking Sahara Desert. There's nothing.
Sahara.
There's nothing here that has
callbacks
that even remotely interests me. This is, I don't even know why I'm getting so animated about this.
Yeah, you're
gotta do something.
There was a bit when Mike the Snare reviewed the new Post Malone record, and it ended with him just going, "I'm so angry that you're bland," and that is Tyler right now.
I guess I just like people who are fucked up, and because I've been fucked up, but people who are fucked up and Kid Cudi has been there for you and it's made a difference in your life. Like, so basically I'm talking to Logan Kenny right now.
I wasn't going to say it, but I knew you were thinking it.
Like, for those people, I'm so fucking glad this exists and it helps for you guys. Mm-hmm. I really am. Genuinely. But like, if Kid Cudi dropped off the face of the earth, I would feel nothing.
Jesus.
I don't want something bad to happen to him. I'm just
He
saying.
would literally become
Oh, yo,
the
you
man
made
on
that
the
clear.
moon.
I'm just saying. I should have been clearer. If he just stopped making music and just stepped away, and didn't say anything, like I would not notice. I wouldn't be like. It wouldn't be 5 years from now, and I'd be like, hey, I wonder what happened to Kid Cudi. I would just have forgotten about him completely.
You would think that if you watched Bill and Ted 3.
You know what? I hope he's good in that, because then I can just be like, Cudi, do this,
That's the thing about Cudi is that that it just burrows its frustration into me again, is that, like, he's a likable dude. He's a guy who has been staying in his lane and experimenting musically, but, like, even at his worst, it's just, like, yeah, again, like, Speed and Bullet to Heaven, you are going to find no defense of that album for me. That is a 1 out of 10.
The last
awful.
Cudi album I listened to, because I was going through his records in order last year, and then I just got to a certain point where I just gave up.
Was that point Indicud?
No, I listened to Indicud, and that's a bad album. It's a bad album.
Terrible.
But although I will say it has a guilty pleasure song on Over Me, which is the 9-minute Michael Bolton
it's the
song.
Michael Bolton one.
And it's just like it's.
Hang on.
No, you.
What?
Let me
You
explain
heard
this.
that right.
Let me explain this to you, Morgan. So
This is the tale of Captain Jack Sparrow.
Indicud is the first album he made after Man on the Moon 1 and 2. And it was basically him trying to do a My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, basically. That's what it's trying to do. It's this fucking 70-minute, 20-song album. And it ends with a 9-minute minimal dance track featuring Michael Bolton singing that this girl should bring her friends home with him so he can fuck them all.
It's real.
It's literally like if you were to in a different context, if you were to approach me and say, as fast as you can, name something that's genuinely so bad it's good for you, I would name that song. It's a nightmare, but it's just weirdly fucking entrancing. Anyway,
Kid Cudi's Runaway.
but anyway, it's not even the last thing I listened to from him. The last album I listened to from him. Morgan looking like fucking Brad Dourif in his final scene in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
It's carry on.
Anyway, the last Kid Cudi album I listened to was an album called Satellite Flight. And the best song
that one. Yeah.
The best song on that album is a song where Cudi, and it's a trash song, let me preface this, but the best song on that album is a song where Cudi says to this girl, are you tasty? Yum, 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 yum.
I love Bon Appetit by Katy Perry.
It's literally like him talking about wanting to lick her. Like, it's like an 8-year-old conception of oral sex. Anyway, that's the last point at which I was with Cudi. Like, I was listening to Cudi, and that's where I approached this coming from. And
I'm stifling vomit.
And, credit where due. There's nothing like that on this record. Cudi has seemed to trim back his worst and most cringe-inducing impulses. But the problem with that is those cringe-inducing impulses, as bad as they were the most interesting thing about him post Man on the Moon 1 and 2. And you don't have them here because he's, I need to stop being cringe, so I'm just going to be boring. And that's what it is. Sad People. There's a song on here called Sad People.
I knew. I was just like, oh man, really?
Sad People.
And the rest of his career, what the rest of his career is going to be, is it's going to be him trying to do Reborn again and again and again. And it's going to be just the most. It's going to be the most.
And it sucks because Reborn is such a good fucking song.
It is a good song.
It's like because the man figured out he could hum, all of a sudden all of his artistic ideas evaporated.
I didn't get to say this in the whole lot of Red review either, but Cudi is my least favorite part of the song that he's on that album, just because he starts humming and I'm like, go away, you don't fit here. Anyway.
No, that's, yeah.
Yeah.
I love like the whole thing that Kid Cudi hums has become a meme, and it's like Cudi's so tragic that he doesn't know what to do with that, so he just starts doing it, and he's like, I'm conscious, barely conscious it's a meme, but he's like, he doesn't realize that in just continuing to do the meme, he's really just kind of like making himself look embarrassing.
It looks lamer and
Self-parodic.
lamer.
I mean,
what
it's
it
like
is.
once the meme is like, once you become self-aware, the meme ceases to be the meme. It would be like if James Hetfield leaned into the fact that he sounded like a fucking Muppet.
Yeah, he's like on this record cut, he's like, look, I'm humming, I'm doing the hum, guys, the hum you like, I'm doing it, you know, guys, come back, come back.
What that
Yeah.
specifically, like, that evokes to me, it's like if on the new Abnormal, every song included a moment where Julian was like, drums please fab. It's like if that was on every song, and that's Kid Cudi on this album.
Yeah, it feels so like, it not only feels like I think that's why it's so frustrating, honestly, is because it's not only just a like paint by numbers, is that it feels like he's catering to his audience when it's like he's never. I sound like somebody who's like massively into him when I say this, and I'm really not. But the one thing that I respected about him, like throughout his career, is that he clearly just did whatever the fuck he wanted. This, however, is just like, I think the production, like, I think it's a good sounding album, but it feels like it's a result of the fact that he like did Kids See Ghost and was like, okay, but what if I like kind of put a little that in my sound, and then all of my production choices will be based on what I think everyone will like instead of what I want to do.
Yeah,
and it's like,
one more thing I want to say, because I worry that if any Cudi fans are watching this, I might have come across at best as malicious towards Cudi, and I don't hate Cudi.
Yeah, really.
I mean, you probably have rated the Man on the Moon albums higher than I have.
I said at the start, I love the first one. The second one I think is pretty good too, although it's flawed. But anyway, I don't hate Kid Cudi. The reason I'm like this is that I had to listen to this album multiple times, and it's just what it did to me. I know he can do better. He's done better in the past, but he's given me no reason to believe that he has that fire in him. Aside from Kids See Ghost,
this should have just not been a Man on the Moon album.
It
doesn't feel like one.
No, it's just a completely random project, and I guess I'll get into discussing it because, you know, I do think this kind of semi-opener Tequila Shots is the kind of first proper track. I do like it, and it's an album with moments like that where I kind of like the Phoebe Bridgers thing, her feature later on. She's pretty great on this album. And some of the beats, you know, they're kind of cool. You know, you got these kind of high-pitched synths layered over this like bass. It gives you like a vibe, an atmosphere that this record is going for. But the problem is, this is a Kid Cudi album paired with this production, because on projects like Kids See Ghosts, he works I would say even to a degree, Whole Lotta Red, he works as like a counterpoint to this, like, to someone with like this crazy amount of energy, like a Kanye West, like a Playboy Carti. But here he just doesn't play to that because he's just standing here naked in the open for 15 of the 18 tracks, no features. And, you know, when he does have a feature, they genuinely just tend to be the best possible parts on this album. Like you mentioned that fucking the one with
Pop Smoke?
Yeah, that one. Skepta and Pop Smoke. That's a great song. It just happens to have a fucking Kid Cudi verse in it, and it's brought down significantly by that. I mean,
it do be like that. It do.
Most of this isn't like bad. I mean, the lyrics, what he's writing itself is like relatable enough. It's like, okay, I get it. You're like a dude. You're a dude like me.
Guy.
Yeah, it's just the performance of it is so limp-dicked. What am I supposed to get out of this? Granted, it does attempt to go harder from time to time.
So limp-dicked, I can feel my sperm dying.
Would you almost say, August, that it feels wet?
Yeah.
Drier than the
But-
Sahara over here.
But yeah, there are some the ad libs on this project I find particularly hilarious because he'll sing some line like "I'm gonna drink myself to death," and then he'll go like "Yeah" after it, and it's the funniest fucking
Yeah,
thing.
it's so true. It's so true.
It's- there's moments of like stupid comedic brilliance on it that are not worth listening to the whole thing for. Yeah, and then let's not fail to mention this album is divided into acts, like it's cut into four segments for no reason.
It's like fucking Denzel Curry, but like, not if it was good.
Yeah,
Well, like Denzel Curry, you can hear distinct changes in the
Yeah.
feel of the record between those
yeah, in the
acts.
style.
Whereas here,
of
it's
it.
like fucking arbitrary.
Like
No,
it's literally just every 4 or 5 songs for no reason.
Okay, no. What it is there's one act. I think it's maybe the third one where he decides to be fine rather than bad. That's the theme of that act. It's that this is the part where I make an effort.
Yeah.
Give him a
Yeah,
cookie.
yeah, you're right. That third act, that's the concept that I'm gonna try
Cookie you buy from
half-heartedly.
Walmart.
Well, I will
Let's
try
get
to
Phoebe
be
Bridges on. She can do something good.
acceptable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. What a
I suspect the Bridgers feature, which until we brought it up again here, I
Which
forgot
should not be
happened.
the case considering how much of a fan you are.
I swear I listened to this album. I did. Really. Maybe. But yeah, it's just it's so clearly to me like I'm gonna get Phoebe Bridgers on a track here because no one else is gonna listen to this, which is the same sort of the impression that I got from this being a Man on the Moon 3 album. There's no reason for it to be.
Correct.
It just is, so people will listen.
Correct. Absolutely. I
mean,
think
one
it's
thing
the
I wanna
biggest
bring
sin,
up-
really.
One thing I want to say with regard to Phoebe on this record is that yesterday she memorably took a shot at the quirky pop musician Ariel Pink, who was at the Trump rally and whatever, not rally, but thing.
Invasion.
That one.
Salt.
And she said, "Oh no, now I have nothing boring to listen to." And I'm like, "Bitch, look at the album you just featured on."
I mean,
Yeah. Like,
not
what is
the
it with
first
her?
time Phoebe's shot taking has bit her in the ass.
Yeah, like what is it with Phoebe Bridgers making like the best album of 2020, featuring on two 2020 albums that are
Saoirse,
boring?
It's because like Kid Cudi, she is a human being who's flawed, and they typically make great music. Ariel Pink, he's one of those people.
I was also
Shock-
referring to the
shocking
1975 record that she featured on.
Yes.
Yeah, that I figured were.
Well, the song that she's on is pretty good. But
Yeah, it's one of the best albums on the record.
Yeah, I mean, it's just top 3 easy.
yeah. Anyway,
No, I mean,
I
I would
digress.
say the song she's on here is one of the top 3 of the record only by virtue of her being on it. And
I would agree with that
Yeah,
too.
it's like if she was on any of the songs, they would
Yeah,
be
I
one of
mean,
the top
it's-
3.
My point was not that it's worse.
yeah,
No,
My point was that
it didn't happen.
why
I don't know, because they
Wow.
follow
Basically,
each other
Morgan's
on
review of
Twitter.
this album is depression causes memory loss.
ow.
Morgan, talk to me a bit about this record.
I think he just did.
You did.
I will do my damnedest. I genuinely have nothing to say about this. I listened to it. It was bad. It left no impression.
Yeah, fair. I mean,
Yeah. So that
It
leaves
was-
me, I think.
Competent. I didn't like it.
That does leave you, Saoirse. Go for it.
Obama.
All right, chill. I haven't intentionally gone last. So I recapped on the Man of the Moon records, like 1.5 of them before this. And like
that.
I have, I feel similarly about this record. I can do Man of the Moon one. The problems are different, but they come out kind of the same. And the first one, I love the instrumentals. I thought they were wonderful and luscious and interesting. There wasn't a song I really gravitated to on an instrumental or a feeling. I wasn't hooked by any of them. Whereas with this one, there's a long stretch of songs. I think it's like really of a quality at which it could be really great. But the instrumentals are so boilerplate. It's just so boring. There's nothing like the luscious, like there's a song on Man of the Moon 1. It's like big pianos that give it such a sense of presence. There's nothing like that here. It's much more generic. And on top of that, for like the first third of it, I kind of hate every song. It's not until Damaged, track 6, that's a song I really like. And it's not until sort of Solo Dolo Part 3 through to Phoebe Bridgers, which is 9 through 14. There's like a stretch of songs I engage with continuously. I think The Void has wonderful hooks. I do quite like the instrumentation in Solo Dolo Part 3. I think Phoebe Bridgers is great on Lovin' Me. And I think the whole stretch is spattered with lyrics I find very compelling. Rockstar Nights, I remember nothing about it, but I have a note here saying that it's bad. So I'm gonna take past me's word that that song is bad. But yeah, just the back end of it, I find incredibly unmemorable. Whereas I remember the first third for being bland and boring. The second half, second third for being better, but still instrumentally uninspired. And I remember the back half for being not remembered. And that's all I really have to say on it. There's spots here where I feel like, this is the Cudi that I want. It's not. He's not here, but it's like his sort of depressed younger brother who's not out of college yet is here. But as a whole, it's just there, and that's about it.
I think I said something to you last night when we were talking about listening to Man on the Moon, and I think that like the greatest thing Kid Cudi has contributed to the world is that him cultivating a fan base and becoming somewhat successful has laid the landscape for Frank Ocean.
Yes, you
That's
did say that.
the reason why I appreciate him as much, because not in specific sonic elements, even though they do obviously both incorporate a like smoother R&B and hip hop thing into their sound. It's more in the sense that they're both these deeply confessional, sometimes really belaboredly awkward artists who are sort of leaning into this like idea of presenting themselves as like as a progression, how they're just sort of exploring themselves through this like lush, beautiful music that's just it got all of these fucking heavy instrumentals, not heavy as in like heavy, but heavy and
I get
like,
you.
lush, I guess. But it's just like Frank Ocean has sort of come and I think taken the spot that Cudi would have taken if he had made consistently quality work.
Yeah,
Which
I just wish I got the Cudi albums that the covers promised.
yeah,
It's like,
all the covers are cool.
I definitely see the Frank Ocean connection, but like Frank Ocean doesn't have the same sense of like directly reaching out to audiences and trying to lift them up that Cudi does, and that's why I think that like I cannot tell Cudi what to do because his music works for thousands of people and helps them. But like I guess to me, it'd be like he would be better as like a motivational speaker or something. Like I haven't watched it, but I noticed he has a TED talk that I've seen a few times float by on YouTube, and it's like, yeah, I bet he would be great at like reaching people.
He seems like a really nice dude, and
He's a really nice dude, but he's also like and this is, I'm not saying this in a mean way, it's just a fact of life because I'm one of these two, but he's a nerd. Like every time the dude talks about like, and to his credit, he doesn't really do that much of it on this record. But every time the dude talks about sex or any kind of the typical kind of like hip hop signifiers. It feels quite postury and shallow, and it just doesn't fit him. And I think that when he kind of gets kind of heartfelt. In fact, one point I haven't brought up, that one of the songs that I actually responded to the most on this record is, relatively speaking anyway, and it's curious because it seems to be a song that not many people like, from what I've gathered, is the song, I can't even remember what it's called, Elsie's Baby Boy.
I think that's a great song.
Which, Stand By Me thing aside, which I don't care for, I think that there's a really kind of quite heartfelt sentiment on the track, and Cudi communicates it almost poetically, I think, in the way that he kind of repeatedly iterates about, being bored in the winter and a little sad boy and stuff. And there's a directness to it. It's maybe not necessarily nuanced or anything like that, but I think he really kind of, it feels like it's distilled quite effectively there. And
he's never been nuanced. That's kind of what made him compelling. Yeah,
exactly. And it's like, I don't know, I just wonder if there's a form for him that would be better than the world of hip hop. I don't know, he just feels so out of step in a lot of ways, in a good way, I suppose. But I don't know. I look forward to seeing him in Bill and Ted, because I think that's kind of cool that he's kind of reaching out and doing stuff like that, because I think he could have a compelling presence if his strengths were utilized in the right way. But I just don't know that necessarily he is the best kind of creative judge anymore.
Anyway, favorite tracks and ratings.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Gang.
Jake, you're up first.
Oh boy, am I. I did enjoy some tracks on here. I enjoyed Elsie's Baby Boy, Mr. Solodolo 3, and I will say She Knows This, why not? And least favorite track, probably like Damaged. Yeah, Damaged. Fucking Joker tattoo ass name song. And Light 5.
Cool.
Now I'm imagining Joker ass tattoo. Like damaged on the Joker's ass.
Yeah. All right. Favorite tracks: Tequila Shots, Show Out, and Lovin' Me. Least favorite track: I don't know. Heaven on Earth, because I don't know, why not? 5 out of 10.
Morgan.
Saying 3 out of 10.
Chill. Alright, so I'm gonna say. Oh, that's the fucking PLAYBOI CARTI track list I'm looking at.
Would anyone have objected if you said songs from the Carti album?
I wouldn't have even noticed.
I'm gonna say Solo Dolo, Baby Boy, and Lovin' Me. My least favorite Rockstar Nights, probably. It's getting like a 5.5 from me.
My favorite tracks. Elsie's Baby Boy. I guess. Yeah, that's it.
Maybe Chinese Satellite, Tyler.
Yeah,
maybe?
yeah, sure.
Featuring Phoebe Bridgers.
Least favorite track. Fuck, who knows? 4 out of 10.
And that gives it, on average, 4.5 exactly, which is in the middle of Plastic Heart's Notes on a Conditional Form.
Appropriate. An album from the very beginning of the podcast and the very end of the year.
Indeed. All right, guys.
Also, feature Phoebe Bridgers.
It took me a few seconds to remember who Notes on a Conditional Form was by.
Oh, God. All right, lads. What are we doing next week?
Next week we are going to be. Do we know we're covering next week?
You'll
do.
have to wait and see. I think we were planning to talk about
Surprise!
some under the radar records. I think it'd be fair to say.
But tune in anyway. Discover new music.
Let us
Have a
know.
good
Let us
time.
know in the comments. What do you think of the albums we discussed today? What do you think of our discussion? Were we too harsh on the two artists we talked about today? Or did we go easy on them? Were they the fucking spawn of Satan? Let us know in the comments.
What our takes are a whole lot of rad or a whole lot of bad?
Hey!
Heyo!
And yeah, go check out our Record Club episode for this week where we talk about Matt Elliott's record Drinking Songs, an incredible thing.
Yeah. That's fair.
Yeah.
What is our record club next week?
Next week's Record Club is The Meadowlands by the Wrens, which is my recommendation. That's a classic emo record. And Rock Over London.
Rock on Chicago.
On Chicago.
Skittles.
Tickle my
Hell
balls.
yeah.